I have never seen an island survival trip this abundant before. From the sea, he gets a red male lobster weighing 3.5 kilograms. On the island, he hunts down a fat, healthy wild boar, the pork sizzling over the charcoal as fragrant fat drips out. He also gets to eat lobster so delicious that the cameraman standing beside him can only silently swallow his tears. And for a late-night meal, there is even a protein-rich golden fish.
This trip truly feels no different from going on vacation. The Celebes Sea is a tropical sea located between Malaysia and the Philippines. Today, Bear Grylls decides to come here and challenge himself. There are countless islands in this area, and he chooses one of them. After flying low for a while, the helicopter suddenly climbs to an altitude of tens of thousands of meters. Once his equipment is ready, he makes a confident jump into the area, free falls for a while, then opens his parachute and aims for the island to land. But jumping directly onto the island is too dangerous, so Bear Grylls chooses to land in the sea nearby. Even so, that moment is still extremely dangerous. If he gets tangled in the parachute lines, the cameraman beside him might be able to clock off for good. He swims for a while and then gets onto the island. What lies ahead is not a sunny golden beach, but sheer cliffs. Bear Grylls is not discouraged at all and directly starts climbing the slope. He has not gone more than a few meters when a towering cliff blocks the way. Just looking at it is dizzying. Fortunately, there are tree roots hanging down nearby. He grips the roots tightly, launches himself onto a vine, then climbs upward at an astonishing speed. Before long, he is already very high up. But he has still somewhat underestimated the height. After a powerful burst upward, both hands are burning and he is panting heavily, so he has to hang there and rest for a while. At this point, he is already close to the top, but the rock jutting out above has absolutely nowhere to hold onto. He gathers his strength, breaks through, and finally climbs up successfully. After that, he does not stop, but continues toward the slope, and on the way discovers a parasitic plant growing on a tree trunk. Normally this kind of plant can store water, but unfortunately, luck is not on his side today. The inside has already dried up, so he can only turn around and leave. Before long, he reaches the top of the island. Below is a beach with lush green tree cover. He immediately turns and charges into the bushes toward it. Compared with climbing up and down slopes, this section is much easier, and he rushes along like the wind, soon reaching the beach on the other side. As soon as he arrives, he sees a small island opposite. But that is not what he needs to think about right now. On islands around the world, more or less some household rubbish can usually be found, so Bear Grylls picks up a few useful items and takes them with him. He walks to a rough, rocky hollow with water inside, bends down, scoops some up, and takes a sip. Unfortunately, it is not fresh water. He stands up and continues walking while searching. The curved tree trunks here happen to be an ideal place to build a shelter. Without hesitation, he finds dry bamboo, builds a raised bed frame between two tree trunks, then finds vines and tightly ties the joints. With that, the bed frame is finished. Seeing that it is getting late, if he does not quickly find food, he will not be able to make up for the energy he has used today. Thinking of the rich resources under the sea, he immediately gets to work, finding wood and building a small platform out in the water, finishing it in no time. When that is done, he finds a wooden pole of suitable thickness, splits one end into 4 branches without cutting all the way through, spreads the ends apart, and sharpens each point. That completes a fishing spear. When darkness falls, he gathers firewood and a torch, uses his fire-starting tool to light a fire over the sea, and stands under the light to hunt fish. The firelight not only illuminates the seabed, but also attracts fish to swim over. Holding the spear, he begins hunting. After several misses, he finally spears a golden fish and, completely satisfied, carries dinner back to the shelter. There is no time for complicated preparation, so he puts the entire fish, still stuck on the spear, into the hot coals to roast. After waiting a while, he takes it out, uses a small knife to cut a piece of fish, and with one bite, finds it crispy outside and tender inside. The taste is just right. Early the next morning, thinking about rescuing himself, he finds a high open place, erects a tripod, piles a large amount of firewood in the middle, then covers it with fresh branches and leaves, completing a signal fire. As soon as the opportunity comes, he can send a signal immediately. Having this ready makes him feel much more at ease. After thinking it over, he decides first to collect bamboo and some items from the beach. He splits the bamboo, arranges the pieces neatly, then lays a sheet of metal on top. Just like that, he has a roof to shelter from rain and sun. He hangs bamboo tubes under the roof, so whenever it rains, they can automatically collect water. With that, the basic survival work is complete. He gathers bamboo and simply makes a small raft. This time, unusually, even the cameraman gets one, so they head together toward the island opposite. The sea is calm and the waves are gentle, and after traveling for a while, they land safely. As soon as he gets onto the island, he immediately heads deeper inland, climbs a slope, and at the top finds a muddy pool containing water. It can also be considered a water source. But what catches Bear Grylls' attention even more are the animal tracks beside it. One look tells him they are wild boar tracks. If he wants to get the boar, Bear Grylls also has to put in some effort. First, he encloses an area beside the animal trail and sets a trap right on the path. That way, as long as the wild boar passes through, victory is almost guaranteed. Next comes tracking it. He steps lightly through the forest, his eyes scanning everywhere, carefully searching each area. The island is not large and very quickly he spots the wild boar beyond the bushes. Bear Grylls gently moves forward and slowly closes in. If he can take it down on the spot, all the better. If the boar gets startled and runs away, that is fine too, because he has deliberately driven it toward the trap. He keeps following it all the way. When the boar finally runs into the trap by itself, Bear Grylls immediately rushes forward, takes the homemade spear, and drives it in hard, directly ending the wild boar's journey. It is said that its meat tastes much better than other kinds of pork. Today is the perfect chance to find out. He lifts his prize and carries it back to the beach, puts the boar on the raft, pushes it into the water, and paddles back to the original shelter. Once there, he hurriedly lights a campfire and starts processing the wild boar, keeping the intestines to use as fishing line. The stomach is also very good as a container, while the rest is discarded. The meat is chopped into pieces. He quickly builds a rack and places the meat on top, and finally covers it with bark to smoke it into dried meat for storage. As darkness gradually falls, Bear Grylls keeps a few of the best ribs, skewers them on sticks, and puts them over the hot coals to roast. After waiting a while, he picks up a skewer and tastes it. He already knew the flavor definitely would not be bad, but he did not expect it to be so delicious that with one bite fragrant fat fills his mouth. The next morning, rain pours down as if water is being dumped from the sky. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he enjoys a refreshing freshwater shower, while the drinking water problem is solved at the same time. After drinking his fill of rainwater, he starts thinking about finding more food. Using the mouth of a plastic bottle, he simply makes an underwater viewing device, then takes the raft and sets off. When he reaches the water between the two islands, the device clearly proves its usefulness. The situation on the seabed becomes plainly visible. Next, he hugs a rock and dives into the sea to adapt to the water pressure, then officially begins his hunt on the seabed. With help from the viewing device, he quickly spots a large lobster hiding beneath the rocks and immediately dives deep, charging straight toward the target. Holding the spear, Bear Grylls unleashes a series of powerful, imposing moves, and the result is that he successfully makes the lobster run away. But he is not going to give up that easily. He takes a deep breath, dives into the sea again, locks onto the target, and charges straight at the lobster. Finally, he securely captures this precious source of protein. Holding the spear and his prize, he surfaces, his excitement obvious without needing to say a word. After that, he brings the protein back to camp. As evening falls, the lobster is placed over the hot coals and roasted until its shell is charred and fragrant. He cuts off the tastiest tail section. At this point, just holding the lobster tail is enough to make Bear Grylls drool, and he hurriedly takes a bite. Oh my God, the flavor is truly incredible. Every bite that goes into his mouth feels like a luxurious indulgence. At that moment, it is no different from being on vacation. The next morning, Bear Grylls continues deeper into the island to look for water. He reaches a swampy area, sits down and tastes a sip, but it is so salty that it cannot be drunk. He stands up, wades through the water, crosses the swamp, and heads up the slope. The deeper he goes into unknown territory, the sooner obstacles appear. But Bear Grylls ignores all of them. He keeps overcoming the difficulties and moving forward, and before long climbs to a high peak. But this still is not the top of the mountain. He turns and continues climbing, passes through thick vegetation, and discovers a dry streambed. Following the streambed for a short distance, a pool of water suddenly appears ahead, and he confirms that it is definitely fresh water. He takes the opportunity to cool his body for a bit. Just as he recovers, he suddenly hears the sound of a boat. Without even having time to collect water, he immediately takes off running down the mountain as fast as he can. When he reaches the beach, they see a boat offshore approaching, and he quickly rushes into the sea and swims out to meet it. This challenge also ends successfully. While other people go into the jungle to survive for 3 days and are hungry for 9 meals, Bear Grylls hunts down fat, healthy prey. He eats grilled meat that is crispy outside and tender inside, crawls into caves to catch porcupines, and after the meal even has raw scorpion sashimi as a snack. Living in a shelter in the middle of the jungle is extremely comfortable. In the Caribbean region of Central America, there is a distant country called Belize. This is one of the places with the lowest population density in the world. More than half of its area is wild, primary forest. The trees are so dense that there is almost no sign of people, and plants alone number more than 5,000 species. In addition to the challenges of the terrain, crocodiles, American cougars, and 8 species of venomous snakes are also hidden here, and Bear Grylls is going to step directly into this land and conquer it. The helicopter lands on a rocky mountaintop. He attaches the rope and quickly descends. When the helicopter leaves, the challenge officially begins. Right now, he is in the headwaters area of a river and is also standing on top of a mountain, which can be considered a pretty good start because rivers are highways leading to civilization. But at this moment, he is standing on a towering mountain peak. Looking beside him, he notices a piece of wood. In survival, every opportunity to gather resources has to be used. He scrapes out wood shavings from inside that contain oily resin and ignite very easily. Gathers some into his bag, then gets up and climbs down along the river. The rocks beside him are extremely slippery. Bear Grylls is walking very carefully, but still slips and nearly falls. Fortunately, he catches himself in time, otherwise the game might have ended right there. That one really makes the fans' hearts jump. After climbing back up and resting for a while, he continues, but this section has reached a dead end. Looking around, he sees that there seems to be a route on the other side of the river, except the water is rushing fast. After thinking for a while, he finds a log nearby, slowly carries it to the riverbank, and lays it across as a bridge. This is an extremely risky move, but at this point there is no way back. He sits on the log and inches forward little by little, struggling hard before finally reaching the opposite bank. Then, he even goes back and conveniently helps the cameraman across as well, before continuing to climb the rocky slope and move along one side of the river. The route on this side is not easy either. He slowly climbs lower, steadies himself on a tree growing out of a crack in the rocks, then holds onto the trunk and edges across. Near the bottom of the waterfall, he holds on firmly amid the violently rushing water and tries to move to the opposite side. Only after a stretch of route that leaves people holding their breath does he continue downstream. But before long, another waterfall blocks the way. He does not know how deep the pool below is, so he does not dare jump recklessly. He finds a vine, ties a rock to one end, and throws it down. When he feels the rock hit the bottom, he pulls it back up to measure the depth. Only after confirming that the pool is deep enough does he confidently jump down. After surfacing safely, he heads straight into the jungle.
The jungle is extremely humid, and the vegetation is dense. He pushes through layer after layer of plants, and on the way encounters a thorn-covered species called an ant tree. This kind of tree is quite useful. As long as the outer thorns are removed, the bark can be used like a painkiller. He takes some, chews it in his mouth, applies it to the wound, and then continues on his way. He has not gone far when, after pushing through the vegetation, there seems to be no route ahead. But Bear Grylls is not discouraged at all. Going forward to check, he discovers a huge underground cave more than 60 feet deep. Beside it is a vine stretching to the opposite side, and an idea immediately comes to him. He pulls the vine over, removes the excess part, grabs it, and swings across to the other side.
Reaching the opposite wall, he quickly grabs another vine, steadies his body on a small rock ledge, and slowly climbs down. This trip is truly extremely dangerous, but fortunately he finally reaches the bottom. He goes deeper into the cave. After walking for a while, the water inside gradually gets deeper, but he keeps going. Eventually, rocks block the path ahead, and now he is forced to take a risk. He dives straight into the water, swims through pitch-black darkness, and just manages to reach the exit. He then continues downward and once again returns to the dense jungle. It seems to have just rained here. Everything around is soaked. He passes a thorn-covered tree with countless ants clinging to the trunk. The two species have a symbiotic relationship. The tree gives the ants a place to live, and the ants protect the tree. But what Bear Grylls is after is the bark, which is effective at lowering the heart rate. He collects some and continues forward. Before long, a giant sausage appears in the forest. Although this animal is not venomous, its large body and strength are still extremely formidable. Bear Grylls thinks of a way to catch the animal for dinner. First, he finds a stick and tries to wrap and control it. After struggling with it for a while, he finally manages to lift it by the tail. But then, thinking there is no need to drag things out, he aims straight at the head and strikes it hard, directly ending the prey's career. He then pulls out his small knife, cuts open the belly, removes the internal organs, and slings the meat over his neck to carry it. By now, it is getting late. The urgent task is to build a shelter first. He finds a place where the distance between two tree trunks is just right and begins gathering materials. He strips off the leaves and keeps only the stems, sets several branches between the two trees, and uses bark as cordage to secure them. He continues weaving two horizontal poles inside, then splits palm leaves in half down the middle and spreads them over the frame. He ties another layer of leaves over the top to cover it completely. With that, a simple roof is finished, and the shelter is quickly completed. By the time he is done, it is already dark. He goes to find fire-starting material and dry firewood, then uses his fire-starting tool to light a fire with extreme ease. With the fire going, it is time for the giant sausage to go on the grill. He skewers a section, places it over the hot coals, waits a long time for the meat to cook, then picks it up and tastes it. The outside is crispy and fragrant, the inside soft and sweet, and it tastes like chicken, except there are a few too many bones. The next morning, heavy rain pours down. He simply stands in the rain and gives himself a thorough wash, then turns and continues the new day's journey through the forest. He has not gone far when a sheer cliff blocks the way, but for Bear Grylls, taking a detour simply does not exist.
He directly grabs the vines clinging to the cliff and climbs up. At first, he climbs very quickly, but he has still underestimated the height. By halfway up, he is already panting continuously, both arms burning and aching, so he can only rest for a while before gritting his teeth and continuing. No one knows how long he has been climbing, but he finally reaches the top. Standing there, he can take in the magnificent scenery of the Belizean rainforest. After resting for a while, he turns and heads down the mountain. Before long, he enters the deep forest again and discovers a cave. That immediately catches Bear Grylls' interest, but according to the old rule, if he wants to enter a cave, he first needs a torch. He takes a piece of wood and ties to its end the flammable material he collected when the challenge first began. Just like that, he has a torch. He lights it from the fire, gets up, and walks into the cave. By the flickering firelight, the inside is full of stalactites everywhere, and in some places water is even dripping down. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he takes out his bottle and fills it with water, then continues deeper inside. Before long, he discovers a porcupine cornered up ahead. It is too good an opportunity, so Bear Grylls immediately rushes forward to catch it, but misses. The animal runs so fast that he has no choice but to lose this precious source of protein. Just as he is about to turn around and leave, he notices another meal on a rock. This one is much easier to catch, so he immediately makes his move and quickly grabs the food in his hand. What he has just caught looks terrifying, almost no different from an alien creature. So Bear Grylls decides to eat it raw like sashimi right there on the spot. He puts it straight into his mouth, and the moment he bites down, it feels like a burst of liquid exploding inside his mouth. After walking for a while, he exits through another cave opening. Here, the entire forest has been flooded. Bear Grylls walks for who knows how long before an enormous stretch of water appears ahead, looking just like a river. If he wants to keep going, the only option is to make a raft. He starts gathering materials and finds a log that looks heavy but is actually very light. It also has excellent buoyancy. He first throws it down at the water's edge, then continues collecting other logs. After assembling them for a while, he adds the piece with the best buoyancy as the main body. The raft is finally complete. Bear Grylls sits on it to test it and finds it extremely stable, so he starts drifting downstream. He paddles like this all day until darkness gradually approaches. At this point, Bear Grylls is quietly drifting along a calm river. The surroundings are so silent that they make people feel slightly uneasy, and from time to time, he cautiously scans all around him. It continues like this until it is completely dark. Just as he is wondering what to do, lights appear ahead on the river. Bear Grylls immediately paddles toward them with all his strength. Signs of civilization have appeared, and this challenge also ends successfully. While other people are still starving during jungle survival, Bear Grylls catches a giant sausage with his bare hands, skewers it, and roasts it over charcoal, and eats nutritious bird eggs. When he is thirsty, there is even wild bamboo milk tea to drink. The sound of a helicopter rings out, and Bear Grylls makes another imposing appearance. This time he has come to Borneo in Southeast Asia, the third largest island in the world, with an area of more than 300,000 square miles. Mountains stretch one after another, the rainforest is lush, and the ecosystem is extremely rich, which also means countless dangers are lying in wait. The helicopter flies low for a while toward the designated area, but the surroundings are covered in dense rainforest with nowhere to land. Bear Grylls has no choice but to deploy from the air, sliding down a rope until he is standing on top of the forest canopy. When the helicopter leaves, the survival challenge officially begins. But the current situation is quite difficult. He and the cameraman are standing at a height equivalent to dozens of floors. Just looking down makes the scalp go numb, so they need to get out of this place quickly. After descending some distance, surrounded by tangled vines in the forest,
Bear Grylls finds a very thick vine, wraps both his arms and legs tightly around it, and relies on friction to control his descent speed. Even though he is extremely experienced, after this descent, his sensitive area hurts so badly that it is almost unbearable, and his little brother nearly goes on strike. For the final section, he simply jumps straight to the ground, looks back up, and swears he never wants to try it a second time. He then turns and heads down the slope. According to Bear Grylls' survival notebook, the most important thing when surviving in the jungle is to find a river. The fastest way is to follow the direction of a valley, because going downhill is quicker. He immediately speeds up, but still has to be extremely careful of the countless sharp thorns in the forest. One careless moment and his flesh could be torn open, in places that are hard to see. There are also creatures quietly sucking away the human body's supply of protein. After overcoming countless dangers, a huge cave appears ahead. He looks around and discovers vines hanging down, opening up the possibility of climbing below. The only problem is that the cave is pitch black inside, so he first has to prepare a torch. In the forest, he finds a tree that produces resin. When this kind of tree is cut, it releases sap that catches fire extremely easily. It is perfect tinder material. He collects some and then finds bamboo. He strips off the outer skin to prepare the torch. He stuffs the resin inside. Finally, he adds some bamboo shavings from a dry bamboo tube. Once everything is ready, he looks for vines in the forest and collects a very long section in case he needs it. He then approaches the cave entrance and carefully follows the vines down. Doing it the same old way, this time his little brother has to endure another brutal round of torture. Fortunately, the descent is quite fast. From here, the slope looks very steep. Luckily, he has the spare vine ready, so he loops it around a rock outcrop and ties it securely to himself. Once he reaches the bottom, he starts a fire and lights the torch, recovers the rope, and begins exploring the cave. The firelight illuminates the cave wall. Countless swift nests cover the rock face. Edible bird's nest is good stuff, but these are not the kind of nests used for bird's nest soup, so there is no bird's nest soup to drink. Still, getting a little protein is fine. He finds several bird eggs, peels both shell and egg into his mouth, and eats them directly. He thought this kind of raw food would not taste good, but after one bite he wants another. He cleans out several eggs before finally feeling satisfied and continuing on his way. The cave is very large, but also full of danger. Fortunately, the route is not long, and he successfully reaches the cave entrance, sits down to rest for a moment, takes a sip of water to calm himself, then continues downhill along the river. The terrain here is extremely steep, and the rocks are slippery, so he tries to avoid dangerous areas. When the route finally ends, a towering waterfall stands ahead, but right there is a tree trunk extending downward. As long as there is even a slight possibility, he will try it. The cameraman can only complain to the heavens, because not everyone is like Bear Grylls, and the cameraman still has to carry a heavy camera. Clinging to the tree trunk and rubbing against it like crazy, he finally reaches the bottom. The way ahead is still difficult, so they move beneath the waterfall to the opposite bank. At this point, Bear Grylls finally remembers the cameraman. Once everything is sorted out, they enter the forest, make a loop through it, and return to the river again. Next comes an enormous boulder. A stretch of only a few hundred meters feels like several kilometers. To make matters worse, heavy rain begins pouring down, and he is soaked from head to toe. Looking for shelter from the rain, he ducks into the forest, but after searching for a long time and finding nothing, he comes back out and discovers that the river has turned into a violent flood. The sight gives him goosebumps. Luckily, he escaped disaster. He continues along the riverbank, and after walking for a while, reaches flatter ground. Just when he thinks the danger has passed, he slips and falls straight into the water. His luck is still good because the water here is deep. He swims to a sandbar in the middle of the river
and only then discovers that a leech has accidentally been sucking his blood. He pulls it off and deals with it on the spot. But the wound keeps bleeding. Fortunately, there is still a solution. As long as your survival knowledge is solid enough, you can find a plant whose leaves can stop bleeding. Pick a few leaves, chew them into a pulp, and apply them to the wound.
After that, he hurriedly sets off again and continues along the river. On the way, he discovers bamboo growing by the bank. In survival, bamboo is a treasure. It can not only be used as construction material and made into all kinds of tools, but many bamboo sections also contain clean water. This piece happens to have water inside, so he opens his mouth and drinks it directly, instantly feeling refreshed. It is safe and reliable. After that, he takes a long bamboo stalk, splits it in half, clears all the internal nodes, ties it tightly together again, then uses bamboo strips to make a fish cage. He inserts the tied bamboo tube inside, places it in the water, and uses rocks to secure it. Just like that, a fish trap is complete. After finishing this, he still has to build a shelter. He walks into the forest and comes to a suitably sized tree. Looking up, he sees that the branches of several trees connect with one another, and the foliage is much denser than elsewhere. An idea immediately comes to him. First, he finds a large number of vines nearby, strips the bark to make cordage, then carries everything back to the original tree. He quickly climbs up, finds an area with dense branches, and weaves back and forth above until he creates enough space for one person to lie down. Then he collects many more fresh branches and covers the top. Just like that, he has a unique shelter in a tree. While there is still daylight, he goes into the forest to look for protein. Very quickly, he spots a snake on a tree trunk and impatiently reaches out to grab it. But luck does not come every time. This time, the struggling snake bites him. Even so, he does not care and immediately controls it. The wound is clearly visible on his hand. Fortunately, this snake is not venomous, but it still sends a chill down his spine. As a precaution, he finds wild yam, breaks a branch, takes the sap, and applies it to the wound to disinfect it. Only then does he carry the snake back to camp and quickly skin it. He skewers it with a bamboo strip and roasts it over the hot coals. After waiting a while, the meat turns golden and fragrant. He picks up the whole snake and eats it. It is crispy and fragrant, tastes like chicken, has just the right balance of lean and fat, and is extremely delicious. After eating and drinking his fill, he climbs into the shelter in the tree and lies down to rest. He also lights a fire nearby to drive away mosquitoes and sleeps soundly. The next morning, he goes to the riverbank to wake himself up, then pulls the fish trap out of the water. Unfortunately, it has caught nothing, so he throws it away and continues on his journey. But the riverbed is full of rocks, so he has to walk very carefully. Before long, a huge sloping rock surface appears ahead. If he slides straight down, it would be very easy to lose control. For safety, he secures a vine firmly in the middle of the flow and follows it as he slides down safely. Compared with simply risking his life, this method is as stable as solid rock. He reaches the bottom smoothly, with the cameraman following closely behind. Just as he is about to continue, he sees that the route below is full of boulders, and following the river would be extremely difficult. So he immediately changes direction, climbs over the rocks, and goes around through the forest. When he reaches the river again, what lies ahead is floodwater overflowing the banks, with no way to tell how deep or shallow it is. Traveling by water is possible, but he needs a raft. Conveniently, a bamboo forest lies ahead, separated from him by a deep ravine. Without thinking, he charges straight down, but he has still underestimated the difficulty of this section. The first thing that happens is that he gets covered in mud. When climbing the slope, it is so slippery that he slides all the way back to the bottom. Only by working toward areas with vegetation to grab onto does he finally reach the bank. When he gets to the bamboo grove, he sees that the bamboo is very thick, but he only has a small knife, so progress is extremely slow. It takes dozens of minutes just to cut the bamboo. Then he cuts it into sections, getting 7 or 8 tubes of roughly similar length before starting assembly. 4 tubes make one group, and he builds 2 small rafts before stacking them on top of each other. Before long, a complete raft is ready. Finally, he uses a split bamboo strip to make a paddle. Once finished, he sits on the raft and lets it drift with the current. This section of river is wide and fairly calm, so travel is smooth. He continues downstream and before long discovers a suspension bridge over the river with many people crossing it. Signs of civilization have appeared, and the challenge is successfully completed. He discovers an enormous fruit growing on a tree. You may not believe it, but he is even happier than if he had found dozens of kilograms of beef. He replenishes his nutrition, harvests sweet honey so delicious it makes his mouth water, and even roasts seeds and eats them happily. This time he comes to Hawaii, to the Kilauea volcano. This volcano remains in a state of activity and attracts more than 2 million visitors every year. But in this barren and dangerous terrain, it is very easy to get lost. He will fall into a desperate situation and begin a new survival challenge. When the helicopter lands at a dormant volcanic crater, he gets ready, grips the rope, and descends extremely quickly. The movement is smooth and fluid. Once the helicopter leaves, the challenge officially begins. Standing there and looking around, he sees nothing but black, cinder-covered ground. In fact, standing in a place like this is extremely dangerous, because only a few meters below the ground is a lake of lava with temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees, and toxic gases are also rising to the surface. The first thing he has to do is leave this dangerous place. After climbing out of the crater, he looks into the distance and sees uneven black ground everywhere. In Hawaii, most people live near the coast. South is the direction for survival this time, and he can determine it using the sun. He immediately sets off across the extremely uncomfortable, uneven terrain. One slip or trip could very easily break a bone, but that is still not the most dangerous part. The farther he goes, the more smoke rises from the ground and the higher the temperature becomes. These gases are sulfur dioxide, and at the same time they prove that lava is very close beneath his feet. He has to leave quickly. He speeds up and walks quickly for a distance, but the smoke becomes thicker and thicker, and the sharp smell burns his nose. He is forced to wrap his shirt tightly around his airway and run with his head down until the smoke finally becomes thinner. Then he hides in a corner to rest. After a while, he continues crossing. The area ahead is even more dangerous because exposed lava can already be seen on the ground. The temperature is frighteningly high. Fortunately, he is wearing shoes, otherwise even half a step would be difficult. But before long, lava surrounds him on all sides, and he can only keep jumping to avoid the dangerous areas. At times, when his shoes stand on ground that is too hot, they immediately catch fire. The scene is extremely terrifying, so he has to be as careful as possible. After a suffocating stretch of travel, he finally escapes the lava zone, but a new problem appears. In a barren place like this, where is he supposed to find resources? The sun is hanging high overhead. He has already been exposed to the blazing heat for a long time, and the water he brought with him is almost gone. If this continues, it will be difficult to last even one day. His only choice is to keep walking and continue moving forward without stopping. No one knows how long he has been walking when vegetation finally appears on the ground, which can be considered a good sign. He continues forward and suddenly discovers a dense area of trees ahead, beyond the black land. His spirits immediately return, and he speeds up and charges into the forest. After weaving through the vegetation for a while, he discovers an avocado tree with large fruits hanging from it. In his current situation, this truly is a precious gift. He throws down his backpack and climbs straight up the tree. He really climbs as fast as a squirrel. Before long, he reaches the top, stretches out his hand, and picks an avocado. It has to be said that this is one of nature's finest foods. It is rich in calories, protein, and good fats, and its nutritional value far exceeds beef. It tastes soft, smooth, and creamy. Only after eating his fill does he climb down, casually taking another fruit with him as reserve food, then continues through the forest looking for a water source. He has not gone far when an enormous deep pit appears ahead. This kind of terrain has a very high chance of holding water, but getting down is not easy because the vertical drop is about 12 meters. He grabs onto a tree growing at the edge of the pit. This kind of tree often grows around deep holes, with exposed roots extending downward. Thanks to that, he can conveniently hold onto the roots and climb down. Having these roots really makes things much easier. After using some effort, he finally reaches the bottom and begins exploring. Dark pits like this often contain water, but if he wants to find it, he first needs a torch. He looks around for materials to make a torch and discovers candle nuts. But these are not for eating. He smashes them open and takes out the kernels inside, gathers enough of them, then finds long, thin twigs and threads them together one by one. He prepares tinder, quickly gets a fire going, and puts the candle nuts into the flame. Before long they catch fire, and a small torch is complete. This not only lights the way ahead, but can also warn him when the concentration of carbon dioxide in the cave becomes too high. So he steps into the pitch-black cave. The space inside is very large, and the rock walls are damp. After following the rock wall for a while, he discovers countless tree roots hanging down from above. The sight is truly astonishing, and these roots contain a great deal of water. That water has been filtered through many layers of soil and rock, so it is extremely safe and clean. He takes out his bottle, catches the water, and drinks deeply. After drinking to his heart's content, he fills the bottle and gets up to continue exploring deeper. After walking for a while, he sees an exit above. The huge tree roots hanging down happen to provide convenient handholds. He grips the roots and climbs up. At the top, he enters an area of dense vegetation, uses the direction of the sunlight to determine his direction, then continues forward. After leaving the thick vegetation, he reaches an open area. He crosses a stretch of volcanic terrain, and then the vegetation becomes dense again. Along the way, he also discovers fresh signs left not long ago by wild boars. He continues and finds an open space beneath a rotten fallen tree, leaning at an angle. It is getting late, so he decides to use it as a shelter. First, he clears the ground because there are many venomous snakes and spiders on the island. Then he finds dry ferns to line the ground and cuts large fern fronds to cover the wood above. With that, the shelter is complete. When he is done, he gathers dry firewood in tinder, brings it back and quickly lights a fire. Darkness gradually falls, and he lies inside the shelter and sleeps soundly. The next morning, he packs up and continues on his way. Before long, he hears bees buzzing. Following the sound, he discovers a beehive on a tree branch. The honey is exposed right on the outside, making it perfect for breakfast. But taking honey is not simple, because if an entire swarm of bees surrounds and attacks him, it will be a serious problem. He thinks it over, finds a large leaf, gathers some tinder and wraps it inside the leaf, conveniently covering his handsome face as well. Then he lights the tinder to create thick smoke and carries it in front of the hive to smoke the bees away. After that, he quickly takes a piece of honeycomb and leaves the hive. Holding it in his hand, he happily eats it right there. It is intoxicatingly sweet, filling his mouth with honey. The abundant energy it provides is many times greater than beef. After eating, he feels power exploding through his body and can walk without even getting out of breath. Before long, he leaves the forest and once again steps onto the pitch-black ground, continuing forward. Although the ground is no longer scorching hot like before, sharp and dangerous rock fragments are scattered everywhere. He sits down to rest for a moment to avoid getting cut, takes off his socks and puts them on his hands, then slowly crawls across the difficult section. No one knows how long he has been moving before he finally escapes that difficult area. On the way, he encounters an enormous fissure that makes him marvel at the power of nature. He follows the edge of the fissure, finds a place to descend and goes inside. But there is nothing worth noticing below, so he climbs back up and continues. After walking farther, he reaches a volcanic crater. Looking up from the bottom, the scenery is breathtaking. In front of him are enormous columns of smoke. These are hydrochloric acid clouds, formed when molten lava meets seawater. They are extremely corrosive, and if accidentally inhaled into the lungs, they can kill a person. After watching for a while, he hurriedly leaves and runs continuously. No one knows how far he has gone when houses suddenly appear ahead. Signs of civilization have appeared, and this survival challenge is officially a success. People always say that surviving in the wild is extremely difficult, yet he still manages to catch a fat, spicy stick and enjoy tender, juicy grilled meat. He harvests a huge amount of seafood and even gets a glass of pure green wild fruit juice. Breakfast also includes a porcupine caught with bare hands and health tea brewed from rabbit droppings. This time, Bear Grylls comes to the Namib Desert, one of the oldest and harshest places in the world, to begin a survival challenge. The helicopter speeds across the desert, taking him to the Skeleton Coast, where the environment is extremely severe and which serves as the starting point. Countless hidden reefs beneath the sea, together with thick fog, have caused hundreds and thousands of ships to run aground, and many sailors have lost their lives, so this place is also called the Gateway to Hell. The helicopter then hovers above the sea. Bear Grylls stands on the landing skid, flips backward, and lands extremely steadily in the water. But beneath the surface of this sea are violent underwater currents, so swimming straight to shore is basically impossible. He has to swim parallel to the shoreline. Only with great difficulty does he finally escape the current, and then large waves hit him and toss him around before he manages to reach shore. Just this short distance leaves him almost exhausted and soaked from head to toe. But he cannot take off his clothes, because doing so would make him easier to sunburn and would also let his sweat evaporate faster, leading to dehydration. He just has to walk and let the sea breeze dry him. After walking along the beach for a while, he discovers the remains of a shipwreck. In survival, no opportunity to pick up resources can be wasted. He gathers a pile of rope and puts it into his backpack, then continues searching around. He picks up a seal skull, a black plastic bag, and also comes across a scorpion. For an ordinary person, it would be dangerous, but for Bear Grylls, this is a familiar dish. He quickly controls it, uses his inherited special move of removing the head and tail, and immediately takes a bite. After eating, he uses a seal bone to dig a hole in the sand. In a place this remote, where even birds would not bother to visit, fresh water is almost impossible to find. Once the hole is dug, he goes to the sea with a cup, fills it with salt water, and pours it into the hole, repeating the process many times until there is enough water. He places the cup in the middle, covers the hole with the black plastic bag, and puts a small stone in the center, waiting for the seawater to evaporate and condense into fresh water. While waiting, he goes out to the rocky shoreline. The rocks are covered with seafood, so much that he could keep collecting endlessly. Just in time for dinner, he fills 2 bags. As darkness gradually falls, he finds a rock outcrop, clears the sand inside, sets up several wooden boards to block the sea wind, and quickly lights a campfire. Once it is completely dark, he places the seafood in the hot coals to roast. After a while, he begins enjoying dinner. The inside is soft and juicy, the meat is fragrant and delicious, and the amount of protein is so high that no one knows how many times greater it is than beef. The next morning, he returns to the simple distillation device, drinks the small amount of water inside in one go, then sets off inland. The desert is desolate in every direction and unbearably hot, so water is the key resource. Mountains can faintly be seen in the distance, where the chance of finding water is higher, so he keeps watching for signs of water as he walks. Along the way, he discovers animal tracks converging from many different directions and guesses that they are heading toward a water source. Carrying a little hope, he climbs a slope to look around, But from there he sees absolutely no hope of finding water. So he has no choice but to return to his original direction and continue forward. As time passes, the sun rises higher and the temperature increases sharply. Being exposed beneath the blazing sun makes the situation very bad. Just as he is about to look for shade to escape the heat, he suddenly hears a dangerous sound. A venomous snake is lying right beside him. Bear Grylls wants to catch it, but first he even calls IP to confirm that it is not a protected animal. He then takes a stick and pulls the snake into an open area, picks up a rock and smashes it hard on the head, then repeatedly strikes it with the stick. The snake is immediately taken down. He carefully chops off the head, and everything that remains is good meat. First he tries a piece of sashimi, but anyone who has eaten raw food knows that if your teeth are not strong, it is hard to swallow, so in the end it still has to be cooked. He carries the snake meat to a large rock, lights a campfire, waits until the coals are just right, places the meat inside, covers it with hot coals, and then buries it under another layer of sand. After waiting a full 81 minutes, he digs the meat out. He originally thought it would not taste like much, but when he peels away the outer layer, the tender, juicy meat inside looks extremely tempting. He tears off a piece and puts it into his mouth, only to discover that the flavor is unexpectedly delicious. It is several hundred times more delicious than beef. However, the cameraman advises Bear Grylls to eat only a little because eating too much can easily cause dehydration, and says he can help deal with the rest. After eating a little, he continues. He keeps searching for water as he walks, but no matter how long he goes, he still finds none. Instead, he discovers signs of animals fighting. Following the signs, he quickly finds the carcass of an antelope. He originally wanted to get some resources from it, but it seems there is nothing left. Just then, a silly little bug jumps onto Bear Grylls' hand. He immediately puts it into his mouth. It is crispy, with a faint chicken flavour that is not bad at all. He then gets up and leaves, climbs onto a rocky outcrop, and before long finds cactus. If he truly cannot find a water source, this can also relieve thirst to some extent, except the flesh is a little bitter. After replenishing a little water, he continues. By midday, the temperature reaches the highest point of the day, and the heat is unbearable, so he finds a cool cave to rest in. Only several hours later, when the weather becomes less intense, does he set off again. Following a gully, he finally discovers a water source. At first, he is happy to have found water, but the very next second, he can no longer smile. He takes a sip and finds it unpleasantly salty, and the surrounding area is heavily mineralized. With no other choice, he can only leave. After walking for who knows how long, he enters an area full of cactus, but do not think every kind can be eaten. Many of the plants here contain milky white sap. Eating even one bite can kill you on the spot. If it gets into your eyes, blindness is almost guaranteed. Of course, not every plant is harmful. You just need to know how to tell them apart. For example, this plant with leaves round like coins contains a lot of water. He picks a handful and squeezes out the liquid to drink immediately. This wild green juice quenches thirst dozens of times better than beef. The scene changes and Bear Grylls continues forward. The surrounding environment begins to change. There is more vegetation and the ground is wetter, until he reaches extremely wet mud, as if the area has just experienced a flood. He quickly digs a hole, covers it with a layer of dry grass, uses a hollow plant stem as a straw, and sucks hard. There really is a great deal of water here. Deciding to stop and recover for a while, he walks to a rock wall, grips the protruding rocks, and quickly climbs upward. Above is a rock ledge that is neither too large nor too small, making it perfect for a shelter. The only thing missing is firewood. He goes to gather wood nearby, ties the bundle with rope, climbs up first while holding one end of the rope, then pulls the firewood up afterward. Once everything is ready, he takes out his fire-starting tool and quickly lights a campfire. Night falls, and the day passes like that.
The next morning he wakes up and boils a pot of water, but this time he wants to drink tea. Looking around the rocks, his eyes suddenly light up when he finds an area where rabbits have been active. There are lots of rabbit droppings here. Bear Grylls grabs a handful, takes them back, pours them into the cup, stirs them into hot water, waits a while, and drinks a cup of uniquely flavored milk tea.
The taste is not very good, but according to what the expert beside him says, this can detoxify the body and is also good for the kidneys. Bear Grylls picks it up, gulps down a few mouthfuls, then gets up and continues the journey. The route ahead is nothing but rocks. He climbs over one boulder and squeezes through another gap. Only with great difficulty does he reach halfway up the mountain, where an almost vertical rock wall appears ahead and blocks the way. The cameraman can only cry to the heavens because he has to carry the camera while Bear Grylls does not. After struggling up the smooth rock face, they finally reach the top of the mountain. From here, they enter the territory of the Bushman. Since he is already here, he may as well shamelessly learn some survival experience. The first lesson is finding water. The Bushmen take Bear Grylls around and find a small-looking plant. But only after digging it up does he see that the tuber underneath is very large. It is full of water, letting Bear Grylls drink to his heart's content. Of course, if he wants to find truly fresh water, there is still a way. They take Bear Grylls to a tree. There is a small hollow in the trunk with a little water stored inside. The best way to get it out is to use a straw. Bear Grylls also climbs up and tries it himself. After learning the lesson on finding water, next comes the most important course. Food is the #1 priority, and porcupines are one of their important food sources. But catching a porcupine is not easy. First, they have to find its burrow, then dig a very large hole. Only then do they begin. Even the local people are wary of the porcupine. A group stands around the hole, watching the excitement and making the situation even bigger, pushing the foreign tough guy, Bear Grylls, into a position where he has to act. Only now does Bear Grylls realize he has been set up. But there is nothing he can do except grit his teeth and go forward to check. The situation is too dangerous, so he hurriedly discusses it with the local people. Eventually, a young man goes down, takes a stick and pokes wildly into the burrow. The porcupine immediately bursts out, nearly knocking Bear Grylls backward. At the critical moment, fortunately, he is wearing shoes, so he steps on the porcupine with his foot, earning thunderous applause from the crowd watching the excitement. After that, they lift the porcupine and carry it back to the tribe. There, Bear Grylls and the people of the tribe begin a lavish dinner. People who really know how to eat are different. They enjoy chewy, tender, non-greasy charcoal-grilled meat, eat protein-rich spider sashimi, add nutrient-packed forest worms, and then even go down to the river to compete with crocodiles for protein. This time, the production team finally gives Bear Grylls some special treatment and upgrades his transportation, letting him ride in an airplane into Arnhem Land in Australia to begin a survival challenge in a land that looks prehistoric. The animals here are still wild, with more than 100,000 crocodiles, some weighing more than a ton. One careless mistake, and he will become someone else's source of protein. He is then taken to the designated altitude, launches himself out of the aircraft, free falls, and opens his parachute in an extremely smooth motion. He lands on a vast grassland and officially begins the survival journey. In Australia, most people live near the coast, so the first thing is to determine direction. He plants a branch in the ground, marks the position of its shadow, waits about 15 minutes for the shadow to move and form an arc, then stands in the middle of the arc, turns toward the sun to determine north, marks it, and sets off. Before long, a jagged rocky field appears ahead, but for him it is no problem. He speeds up and jumps straight to the top. There he discovers a tree that has been struck by lightning. Its burned branches spread in every direction. The core has left behind a large amount of charcoal, something extremely useful, so he takes the opportunity to gather some before continuing forward. The surrounding landscape is full of deep holes and sheer cliffs, and the dangerous terrain makes movement extremely difficult. He chooses the shortest route through the rocks, while the camera crew behind struggles to keep up. Squeezing through narrow rock gaps, they even encounter a snake along the way, giving the cameraman a fright, so Bear Grylls has no choice but to find an easier route through a cave and quickly gets out the other side. Below the vast rocky area, he discovers an enormous deep pit. Curious, he moves closer and sees a water source below, just in time to relieve his thirst. But to avoid drinking dirty water and getting a stomachache, he takes off his shirt to use as a filter, puts charcoal inside, adds a layer of sweetgrass, then pours the water through. Thanks to that, the filtered water is much safer. He takes a cool, refreshing drink, and the feeling of quenching his thirst is dozens of times more satisfying than eating beef. After resting, he continues across the rocks and suddenly slips, nearly falling into a ravine. In that dangerous instant, he has to grab tightly onto a rock ledge with both hands and only narrowly escapes disaster, sending a chill down his spine. After calming down, he carefully makes his way lower. He enters a cave and, on the rock wall above, discovers traces of smoke, proving that this place was once inhabited by Aboriginal people long ago. He goes outside and continues exploring. Nearby, he sees another ancient rock painting, further confirming his guess that this site has existed for more than 40,000 years. Looking at the shape of an Australian lungfish painted on the rock, he guesses that it is a sign pointing to a nearby water source, so he immediately goes looking. Sure enough, he quickly discovers a river. For safety, he stands on the bank and carefully checks whether there is any danger before entering the water, taking the opportunity to cool his body and fill his water bottle. With enough water, he starts thinking about finding more protein. While searching for fish along the riverbank, he suddenly notices something in the water and immediately dives down to grab it with his bare hands. Damn, this one is pretty big. It turns out to be a water snake, fortunately non-venomous. He drags the thick-skinned, firm-fleshed prey onto the bank, quickly finishes it off, and carries it back to the cave to prepare it. This time he does not use a fire starter. Instead, he makes fire himself by rotating wood and rubbing it by hand until sparks appear, then blows the tinder into flame. In the end, he gets a roaring fire going, enough to amaze anyone watching. He puts the snake over the coals to roast. While waiting for it to cook, he goes outside, finds a tree with thick bark, peels off large pieces, carries them back, arranges some wood, then lays the bark on top. Just like that, he has a soft, comfortable bed. When the grilled food is just cooked, he draws his knife, cuts off a piece of meat and takes a bite. The lean and fat are balanced. The meat is tender and fragrant, neither dry nor greasy. The next morning, breakfast cannot be skipped either. Walking around the rocky area, he finds a large spider, does not think much about it, tears off the head and puts the rest into his mouth. Another protein-rich meal is complete. Next, to determine his direction more accurately, he decides to climb to a high point and look around. This time, the cameraman has gotten smarter and simply hands the camera to Bear Grylls to carry himself. Holding the camera, Bear Grylls climbs the sheer rock wall, hangs in mid-air for a while, and only with difficulty reaches the top. Looking down from above, he sees a relatively easy route between the mountain ranges, immediately determines his direction, and sets off without resting. Before long, he enters dense forest and a gigantic crocodile suddenly appears ahead. Facing this walking block of protein, the production team even jokes that if it were not a protected animal, he could catch it. But Bear Grylls can only force a smile, because no one would be foolish enough to believe that. Just then, a low growl sounds out, frightening everyone, and they hurriedly take a detour. He has not gone far when he encounters another pond. Alert, he senses that something is wrong and picks up a rock to throw into the water. The moment the surface erupts into movement makes his scalp go numb. Clearly something extremely dangerous is down there. So he makes a huge detour to avoid that deadly area.
But in the end, another river still blocks the way ahead.
Not wanting to wade into the water, he looks around and discovers a leaning, fallen tree stretching across to the opposite side. Carrying the camera, he follows the sloping trunk and climbs toward the other bank. At first, everything goes fairly smoothly, but when he is almost there, he suddenly slips and nearly falls straight into the water. He has to hug the trunk tightly with both arms just to save his life. Then he hooks his legs back around it, slowly transfers to another tree trunk, and slides down. He finally sets foot safely on the opposite bank. He thinks he has escaped the danger, but after walking only a few more steps, another river blocks the way. He gets the idea to make a raft, gathers logs and lays them parallel, uses long vines to tie them tightly together, and adds a thick layer of bark on top. Just like that, a simple but sturdy raft is born. He pushes it into the water and continues the journey. Along the way, he picks up a piece of wood covered in sharp, backward-pointing thorns like fish hooks, cuts off a small section, and turns it into a fishing hook. Once he has a fishing rod, he also needs bait. He goes to the base of a tree, gathers a piece of spiderweb together with the spider inside to use as bait, then sits back on the raft and continues drifting downstream through the frighteningly quiet river. No one knows how long he has drifted when he enters a vast area of water, with huge crocodiles appearing everywhere along the banks.
He has never fished in a place this exciting before, so he immediately becomes interested, drops his line into the water, and before long pulls up a large bass. But at that exact moment, a crocodile hiding nearby also targets the prize, and the two sides begin a fierce tug of war.
The pull from beneath the water is too strong, causing the fishing line to snap. The crocodile calmly carries off the protein, leaving Bear Grylls with nothing to do but helplessly throw out a few threats to vent his frustration. Not daring to stay long, he immediately leaves the dangerous area and continues paddling the raft for more than an hour. As the water gradually becomes shallower and land appears ahead, he has no choice but to abandon the raft and continue on foot. Along the way, he discovers an enormous crocodile skull lying in shallow water. It is so large that it looks like the fossil of a prehistoric creature, making him even more cautious. Just looking at the still water around him sends a chill down his spine. And that is not all. He also feels an unusual itch on his legs. Looking down, he sees several leeches clinging tightly and immediately removes them on the spot. As time passes, he gradually enters a mangrove forest, but there is no way to speed up because tangled branches and roots block the path. On top of that, dense, biting insects keep swarming and attacking him, making him suffer terribly. After being attacked continuously, he has no choice but to stop and smear mud all over his body to protect himself from insect bites before continuing. A short distance of only a few kilometers feels like dozens of kilometers, consuming a huge amount of energy. To replenish it, he finds a rotten log, digs out several worms from inside, and has no choice but to eat them raw like sashimi because there is no way to cook them. The taste is not very good, but thinking of the fact that their protein content is many times higher than beef, he grits his teeth and swallows them all. After eating, he continues forward. When he reaches drier ground, to avoid losing direction, he places a long stick ahead as a marker and keeps walking toward it. Repeating this again and again, no one knows how long it takes before he finally escapes the mangrove forest. Human footprints appear on the sand ahead. He immediately follows them and quickly meets people in front of him, officially completing this survival challenge in full. On other journeys, his food is no different from a lavish feast in the wilderness. Fresh, delicious fish, juicy fish meat, rich, sweet scallops eaten raw and refreshingly cool, and bird eggs dozens of times more nutritious than beef, to the point that even crabs are only worthy of being fishing bait. It feels like survival, yet also like going on vacation. This time he arrives on the west coast of Panama and is randomly dropped onto a deserted beach. Anyone who has survived on an island understands that choosing the right island is a matter of life and death, and the most important thing is still fresh water. The small, barren strip of sand ahead looks hopeless at first glance. Staying here long-term would definitely be extremely dangerous, so he immediately decides to leave. Ignoring the possibility that sharks may be in the sea, he puts his head down and swims toward the nearest island. During the swim, a gigantic humpback whale suddenly surfaces nearby. The terrifying difference in size makes even his arms and legs go weak. After taking in that breathtaking sight, he continues swimming and finally reaches the edge of the island. As soon as he gets ashore, he encounters an almost vertical cliff, making even the cameraman cry out in amazement. But he does not hesitate and continues climbing the rocks formed by the collision of two geological plates over more than 1 million years. The terrain is extremely difficult to climb and very easy to slip on. Thanks to his toughness and persistence, he finally reaches the top. The island is covered in lush green vegetation. The grass is as high as a person's head, and there is even a vast banana grove. But what he cares about right now is not food, but the possibility of rescue. He walks to the far side of the island and looks out at the sea, seeing only endless emptiness without a single boat in sight. Although this is only a small island, it seems to be the richest place in resources in the surrounding area. On a rocky outcrop, he discovers the carcass of a dead bird. The smell is rather unpleasant, but he still takes the skull because it might be useful later. He keeps searching. In a sheltered corner among the rocks, he finds a pile of marine debris washed ashore. Pieces of wood, fishing net, plastic sandals, and all kinds of useful materials. Now he has resources, but if he wants passing boats to notice him, he has to create a smoke signal. He enters the forest, picks up 3 logs, gathers more dry grass, then carries everything to a high, open area on the island and quickly builds a signal fire platform. He understands that as time passes, his physical strength will gradually decline, and by the time he wants to search for a way to survive, he may no longer have the strength to do it. So the urgent task is to find a stable source of survival. He reaches a damp rock outcrop, bends down, tastes the water, and confirms that it really is fresh water. Although there is not much, some is better than none. He takes a cord and an empty bottle and uses the cord to guide the dripping water into the bottle for storage. With the drinking water problem solved, he starts thinking about protein. He sharpens a piece of wood and attaches the sharp skull bone from the bird he picked up to the end, creating an extremely effective multi-purpose spear. Carrying his new weapon to the rocky shoreline, he easily catches a crab, but not to eat raw. He smashes it and throws it into a large tidal pool as bait to attract fish. Once many fish gather around the pool, he immediately makes his move, locks onto a target, grips the spear, leaps, and thrusts down. He looks full of imposing energy, like a master, but misses every time. Only after countless attempts does he finally spear a large triggerfish. Pulling the fish onto the shore, he discovers that this species has hard teeth like human teeth, and the backward-pointing spines on its back are also powerful defensive weapons that keep larger fish from swallowing it. In the end, though, it still becomes a source of protein. He draws his knife and first removes the fish roe. This is the real delicacy, and he eats it raw right there. With the first bite, juicy flavor bursts inside his mouth with just the right balance of salty and sweet. After finishing one portion, he eats the remaining portion as well, while saving the fish meat to cook later once he has a fire. When he is done, he returns to the water collection point and sees that a little fresh water has accumulated. He takes the opportunity to drink some, then continues exploring around the island. Before long, a deep crevice appears ahead, with a huge rope trapped below. To retrieve it, he uses fishing net and wood to create a foothold, wedges the wood into a crack in the rocks, then uses the net as a rope to climb down. He successfully reaches the rope and carries the huge coil on his shoulder. Seeing that the exit ahead leads directly to the sea, he has no choice but to hug the rope and swim out, struggling to drag the massive coil with him, but eventually reaches the shore successfully. Just as he is dragging the rope onward, he suddenly sees a boat offshore. He immediately throws down the rope and runs like crazy toward the signal fire, quickly lights it, jumps to his feet, shouts loudly, and keeps waving to signal. But the boat is too far away, and apparently no one notices him. The rare opportunity slips away just like that. But survival is like this. The more difficult the situation becomes, the more firmly you have to hold on to your spirit. By now it is already afternoon, and he starts thinking about building a place to rest for the night. The open area ahead is very suitable for setting up a shelter. He uses the fishing net to tie a hammock between two tree trunks and lies down, planning to enjoy a good sleep, but then has to secure it more firmly in case it rains during the night. Above it, he builds a roof frame and covers it with large banana leaves. He also places a leaf beside it to collect fresh water, with a bottle underneath to catch it. At night, he lights a campfire and skewers the fish over the hot coals. The fragrant sea fish immediately lifts his spirits. The next morning, the bottle has collected quite a lot of water, so he starts thinking about breakfast. He goes into the sea and dives down, first training his ability to hold his breath so his body can adapt to the water pressure. After a while, once he reaches his best condition, he starts searching for protein on the seabed, and before long feels out a large shellfish. Back on shore, he opens the shell, removes the internal organs, then uses his knife to take out the meat and eat it. The taste is lightly sweet, fresh, soft and juicy. It is rich in high-quality protein, as well as vitamins and minerals. Add a little wild seaweed after eating it, and there is a perfect breakfast. But if he wants to live on the island long-term, water is indispensable. To get more fresh water, he cuts a plastic bottle into a suitable cup-shaped opening, lights a fire on the spot, and places a simple distillation setup over it. While waiting, he stands by the sea with a worried expression because no rescue has appeared. The island's water supply cannot hold out for very long either, so he decides to take a gamble. He gathers large logs, joins them together, and ties them firmly into a raft. Before setting off, he collects the water from the distillation setup together with the water he had stored earlier, filling a large bottle, then drags the raft into the sea. After drifting for a while, the sun becomes scorching. To avoid sunburn, he crawls under the black net for shade. When thirsty, he drinks only small sips. After drifting like this for several hours, he suddenly sees another island, immediately jumps into the sea and swims toward it. The place is full of sheer cliffs, but climbing is not a problem for him. The most unpleasant thing is the overpowering stench, and bird droppings are everywhere. After climbing for a while, with his hands covered in filth, he reaches the top, and only then discovers that this is a tiny island with nothing except cactus and rocks. With great difficulty, he finds several bird eggs, but most of them are already rotten. Fortunately, one is still good. It tastes fishy and rich, but is quite nutritious, so he forces himself to finish it. After that, he finds a little water collected in a crack in the rocks. Although he knows it may contain a lot of dirt, at least it is still fresh water, so he gathers it and continues back onto the raft, drifting out in the middle of the sea. By the time sunset arrives, the fresh water is completely gone again. Faced with this desperate situation, he chooses one final struggle. He hangs the water bottle up, connects one end of a plastic tube to a cup and the other end to his body to create his own water source, amid cries of disbelief, making even the cameraman exclaim that he is truly professional. After replenishing a little water, he collapses exhausted on the raft. Only at night does he force himself back up to look around, but there is still nothing in sight. And just like that, the next morning arrives. Suddenly, a large stretch of land appears on the sea, instantly lifting his spirits. He hurriedly paddles toward it, and with the waves pushing him forward, he enters a dense forest and continues drifting along the water. No one knows how long it has been when a boat anchored by the shore appears ahead. He immediately dives into the water and rushes onto land. There he discovers a large crowd of people, and the rescue helicopter is already waiting. He boards the helicopter and officially completes this challenge. But the journey is not over yet. Next, he faces the wilderness of Iceland, known as the land of ice and fire. Because it lies near the Arctic Circle, it is extremely cold. But there are also countless volcanoes that make many areas scorching hot, creating two extreme environments that exist side by side. When he arrives, the vehicle is still moving when he jumps out, flips once in the air, and lands steadily on the ground. The survival challenge officially begins in the middle of a raging snowstorm. Strong winds howl together with thick fog, making it impossible to know where he is. All he knows is that if he does not quickly find shelter, he could easily lose his life. After walking against the wind for a while, he can no longer stand it. He uses the deep snow beneath his feet, quickly digs a hole, crawls inside to hide, and waits until the wind gradually weakens before continuing. When the weather improves, he chooses a route down the mountain and follows the slope. Very quickly, he reaches a vast glacier. Knowing that walking on ice makes it very easy to slip, he takes off his socks and wraps them around the outside of his shoes to increase friction. At the same time, he has to guard against falling into deep glacier crevasses. He uses a rope to tie himself to the cameraman, making the cameraman both nervous and worried because of Bear Grylls' famous recklessness, and the cameraman can only try to keep as much distance as possible. The two continue forward. Along the way, they discover a terrifyingly deep hole, then enter an icy slope with a small crack in the middle. They carefully cross it and finally reach the edge of the glacier. Ahead is a dangerous, steep descent. Bear Grylls gathers the rope, cuts a small groove into the ice, threads the rope through it, and descends skillfully. His movements are smooth, and he quickly lands safely, then continues without stopping toward the foot of the mountain. After a long journey through the biting cold, a misty area of steam appears ahead. From a distance, the entire region looks as if it is radiating heat. To save time, he quickly slides down. The moment he lands, he cries out in excitement and heads into the active volcanic area. The boiling mud pools are so hot that if he slips and falls in, he could turn into a feast for 8 people. So he carefully works his way through the dangerous area and accidentally reaches a riverbank. By now, the thick steam has soaked his entire body. After following the river for a while, his body temperature begins dropping quickly. Lighting a fire to warm himself is not the ideal choice at this moment. Fortunately, a bubbling pool of warm water appears beside the river, immediately giving him an idea. But because the water is too hot, he stacks rocks around it and channels additional cold water in to lower the temperature. Then he takes off his clothes, steps in, and soaks himself, enjoying a hot spring in the middle of the wilderness. The feeling is so comfortable that he is unbelievably happy. After resting, he continues following the river, conveniently bending down to drink his fill of water. When he looks up, it is already late afternoon. He sees some dry firewood above and decides to find a place to camp overnight. Leaving the riverbank, he climbs the slope to the top. Just as he is about to gather dry branches, he suddenly notices a rocky outcrop on the opposite side. Curious, he crosses over using dangerously suspended branches. Fortunately, everything goes smoothly. Once there, he follows the rock wall and discovers a natural cave. That means he does not need to spend effort building a shelter. After that, he goes back outside to continue looking for firewood and notices a birch tree. Its bark catches fire extremely easily even when damp, so he peels off some and takes it back. He crushes it up, places it on the ground and quickly lights it with his fire starter. The flames roar up violently. He puts a cup of water on to boil, then goes looking for protein. As soon as he steps outside, he comes across an earthworm. Since there is one, he digs around the rocks and quickly gets an entire handful. That is enough for dinner. He returns
and throws all of them into the cup of boiling water.
After waiting a while, he picks them out and tastes them. They are soft and full of moisture. A little slimy, but so rich in protein that he jokes they could even make beef jealous. So he keeps eating until he is full. When he is done, he takes a piece of cloth, puts it into the cup, covers it with a rock, and heats it for a while to make char cloth. This material catches fire even better than birch bark. With only a little friction, it ignites immediately. The next day, he returns to the riverbank and continues following the flow. The valley ahead becomes narrower and narrower. At the end, an enormous waterfall appears with a sheer height that makes anyone's skin crawl. The cameraman beside him feels his scalp go numb because he is still carrying a camera weighing more than 20 kilograms. But Bear Grylls does not care. He ties the rope to a nearby rock and hurriedly descends, safely crossing the violent current. After safely getting past the rushing water, the path ahead becomes flatter, so he quickly leaves the gorge. After running for a while, he encounters another cave and walks straight inside. Fortunately, there is still some light here. At a fork, he tries the left side for a few meters, reaches a dead end, then turns back and takes the other direction. The light ahead becomes brighter, and that is the exit. After leaving the cave, he continues moving forward at full speed. His physical strength is gradually running out, so he starts thinking about food. Just then, there is a place by the riverbank where fish are hiding, accidentally giving him a chance to catch one by hand. He watches the fish's position, slowly touches it lightly, then suddenly tightens his grip and catches a large fish. Because he is so hungry, he makes sashimi on the spot,
Cuts off the head and internal organs and eats it raw immediately. The fish is fresh and sweet, soft and delicious without being greasy, and rich in vitamins and high-quality protein. In only a short time, he eats the entire fish and continues following the river. After walking for a long time, the surface water disappears. Ahead there are only countless rocks with the water flowing underground. With no road left,
he is forced to climb upward. But the rock surface looks extremely prone to collapse. As soon as he tests his weight on it, the soil and rocks inside break loose. Fortunately, they do not roll down. To make things safer, he pulls out a dead tree and uses a branch to make a simple climbing pick. Thanks to that, climbing the slope becomes much easier, and before long he reaches the top. Ahead lies an area filled with bare, leafless trees, their branches tangled together in a mess. An unpleasant smell rises everywhere, making movement extremely difficult. Along the way, he also discovers the carcass of an Arctic fox that already smells bad, so he can only regretfully give up that source of food. After struggling through the dense, dry trees for a long time, a wide open space suddenly appears ahead. In the distance, there is also a river. He immediately charges toward it like a wild horse released from its pen, moving at an astonishing speed. He quickly reaches the bank, but the water ahead is flowing extremely fast, so crossing to the other side is not easy at all. To avoid reaching the other side and shivering from wet clothes, he takes off his clothes, puts them into his backpack, then steps into the river. Facing the direction of the current, he moves his feet crosswise, one step at a time. This way of walking gives excellent balance, with no sign at all that the water is going to sweep him away. Before long, he reaches the opposite bank, puts his clothes back on, and continues. The environment changes again. Uneven rocks are covered completely in green moss. This is a lava field formed by ancient volcanic eruptions. It looks lush and green, but it is extremely dangerous because bottomless holes may be hidden beneath the moss. One wrong step and disaster strikes. After walking for a while, he stops, grabs handfuls of moss, stuffs them inside his clothes to keep his body warm, then continues forward. After a long journey, he finally leaves the moss-covered area and reaches the coast.
Huge waves roll in and crash onto the shore, but there are still no signs of people. He continues along the coastline and discovers a large flock of birds gathered together. Only when he approaches to check does he become shocked to see a gigantic whale lying on the beach.
This enormous source of protein is so rarely seen that its tail alone is larger than the cameraman traveling with him. After looking at it for a while, he thinks it over and decides to leave it alone and not touch the huge mass of meat. He believes rescue is still more important, so he turns and continues. Along the way, he also discovers the wreckage of an airplane. He steps inside and finds that the space is quite large, excellent for blocking both wind and rain.
Seeing that it is getting late, he decides to spend the night there, gathers dry wood, and quickly lights a fire. When night falls, he lies down to rest. Just as it is about to become completely dark, he suddenly sees a faint light in the distance, like a lighthouse, and immediately runs toward it.
Signs of civilization finally appear, and this challenge officially succeeds.
People often say surviving on a deserted island is extremely difficult. But this time, his journey is like a vacation, with endless hermit crab claws, fragrant charcoal grilled fish for a late-night meal, nutrient-rich sea cucumber eaten raw, and protein-rich white termites as snacks.
This time he comes to an area near Sumatra, one of the places with the most volcanoes in the world, choosing to challenge himself on the island farthest from the mainland, where a single wrong decision can lead to serious consequences. When the helicopter reaches the designated altitude, he grips the support frame with one hand and decisively lets himself fall, landing near the island's coast. A few meters before hitting the water, he releases the parachute so he can enter the sea safely, then swims to shore. The distance is not far, but the ocean currents around the island are extremely violent. By the time he reaches shore, his arms and legs are weak from exhaustion. He sits on the sand and rests for a while before getting up and beginning to explore. A great deal of rubbish has washed up along the shoreline. He picks up several bottles and cuts and combines them into an underwater viewing device, takes it into the sea, and can clearly see the ocean floor. After that, he picks up a piece of coral, leaving the cameraman confused because this thing is not edible. Only when he gets back onto shore does it become clear that the coral releases a natural slimy coating. Normally, it uses this to protect itself, but under the blazing sun, it becomes a natural sunscreen for him. The effect is so good that it is compared to SPF 50+, protecting him very well from sunburn. After using it, he puts the coral back into the sea and enters the forest. The hot, humid jungle makes his body lose water continuously, so fresh water is the #1 priority. He searches for a long time but cannot find any pool of water. The ground is nothing but cooled volcanic rock, hard as concrete. Just as he is becoming worried, he notices a few drops of water collected on leaves and immediately drinks them all. It is only a little, but it gives him a direction for finding water. He continues walking while watching the ground and gradually finds water collected in coconut shells and on large leaves, drinking it sip by sip to temporarily solve the drinking water problem. Once he has water, it is time to find food. When he returns to the beach, he discovers that this island is unexpectedly rich in resources. Large hermit crabs are crawling everywhere on the ground.
He catches one, pulls the body out, and breaks off the claws, because these are the finest part of the animal. Before long, he has collected an entire pile of claws to cook later. While he still has strength, he finds a piece of wood, sharpens one end into a fishing spear, and immediately dives into the sea to look for protein.
Today, luck smiles on him. As soon as he enters the water, he comes across a sea cucumber. He quickly surfaces, swims back to shore, uses his knife to cut it open, removes the internal organs, and eats it raw right there. Uncooked sea cucumber is as chewy as rubber, but because it is rich in high-quality protein, he still forces himself to finish it before diving back into the sea. This time, he is not as lucky as before. After several dives, he still finds nothing worthwhile, but in exchange, His body gradually adapts to the pressure underwater. Each time he dives, he can stay below longer. Eventually, he notices an unusual patch of sand on the seabed. He dives down, takes the spear, and thrusts hard into the sand. He immediately feels a very strong, struggling force traveling back through the shaft. When he pulls it up, it turns out to be a large, golden fish. Together with the crab claws from earlier, today's meal is extremely lavish. But ever since arriving on the island, he still has no place to stay. He finds a tree base by the sea that is very suitable for building shelter and immediately starts working. He walks around looking for dry bamboo. If there is not enough, he uses wood as a substitute, cuts off unnecessary branches, then climbs a palm tree and gathers large fronds as roofing material. For cordage, he uses the aerial roots of a wild fig tree. These roots are extremely flexible and strong. He quickly climbs up and cuts down a large bundle, enough material, then returns and begins building the camp. He ties the ends of 2 bamboo poles together and props them diagonally against the tree. He makes 2 more similar sets spaced apart, places a horizontal pole above them, and firmly ties every joint. About 1 meter above the ground, he ties in 2 more poles as the bed frame, making the whole structure extremely stable. Then he weaves roots tightly inside to form the sleeping surface, tears palm leaves apart, and covers the frame to make the roof. He also puts a layer on the bed to make it softer, and finally splits bamboo tubes in half and places them beneath the roof so they can collect fresh water when it rains. When darkness falls, he quickly climbs a tree to get fire-starting material, gathers dry firewood, then sparks a fire. He begins preparing dinner. The fish is cut into sections, skewered, and grilled over the hot coals, while the crab claws are buried in the fire. After waiting a while, he can enjoy the fragrant crab claws, with meat inside that is fresh, sweet, soft, smooth, and almost indescribably delicious. Before long, he has eaten dozens of crab claws. After finishing them, he cuts a piece of fish and puts it into his mouth. The fish meat is soft and sweet, neither tough nor greasy, with just the right salty flavor. The next morning, heavy rain pours down. He did not expect the water collection system he built to become useful so quickly. After drinking a belly full of fresh water, he steps outside and showers in the rain. The feeling of bathing in fresh water is extremely pleasant. At the same time, he does some exercises to warm his body and lift his spirits. While he still has strength, he turns his attention back to food under the sea. As soon as he dives down, he encounters a sea urchin and quickly catches it and brings it ashore to process. This famous delicacy does not need complicated preparation. Remove the spines and internal organs, and it can be eaten raw immediately. The fresh, rich, fragrant taste is difficult to resist. After eating, he goes to the beach to gather bamboo and palm leaves to build a raft for crossing the sea. But before leaving, he enters the forest to find a termite nest, grabs handful after handful of white termites, and puts them into his mouth like a protein-rich snack. Only after eating until he is full does he happily return to continue preparing materials. He gathers more bamboo and starts building the raft, drills holes in both ends of the bamboo tubes, threads wooden rods through them to connect everything, then ties them tightly into a sturdy frame. Before setting off, he still has to prepare enough fresh water, so he looks for tall coconut trees, chooses one growing at an angle, and wraps a rope around the trunk. Using friction, he climbs up very quickly, picks a whole batch of coconuts, and brings them down as a reserve water supply. To avoid being exposed to the sun for too long out at sea, he also builds a small bamboo roof on the raft, using a bamboo frame and palm leaves. As soon as everything is finished, he pulls the raft into the water.
The sea around the island is full of underwater currents, and large waves keep crashing in. Sitting on the raft, he braces himself and fights back as the waves smash him up and down countless times. But in the end, the raft withstands the pressure. Only when the sea finally calms does he relax and continue drifting.
When tired, he lies down to rest and keeps drifting like this until sunset. Looking at darkness covering the vast ocean, a primal fear begins rising inside him. Even worse, the raft seems to be slowly sinking. If he falls into the sea and becomes shark food, then it is all over. Just when he is panicking and does not know what to do, a fishing boat appears in the distance. Without any hesitation, he jumps into the water and swims toward it at full speed. Signs of humans finally appear, and this challenge succeeds once again. While many people trying to survive still do not even have enough to eat, he casually cooks hot pot in the wilderness, catches large fish in the river, and grills them until they are crispy outside and tender inside. For snacks after the main meal, there are also juicy, protein-rich insects. His next destination is a volcanic region in New Zealand, a place that attracts tens of thousands of people every year to admire its magnificent mountains, volcanoes, and forests. And here, a new survival journey begins. Every year, people get lost in this place. Bear Grylls will simulate a person lost in the wilderness. A motorboat travels upstream until it reaches the base of a waterfall, then suddenly turns around. Bear Grylls jumps into the water, officially beginning the survival challenge. He swims to a nearby rock, quickly climbs onto it, then enters the dense, overgrown forest. As soon as he sets foot here, he loses his sense of direction. If he wants to determine his position, relying on the sun is the best choice. He takes out his knife, holds a small branch against the reflection on the blade, and looks for the direction where the shadow is strongest. Behind that is the position of the sun. Since he is in the southern hemisphere, the sun is in the north, which is also the direction he continues moving toward. He has not gone far when he reaches a tree with bark as thin as paper and discovers a hollow. A frightening-looking creature crawls out from inside. In fact, creatures like this existed even before the age of the dinosaurs, but in this man's eyes, it is still nothing more than a source of protein. He intends to take a bite right away, but before even knowing where to start, he reaches out and grabs it. In the end, he removes the head and stuffs the entire creature into his mouth. Oh my God, the taste and sensation are truly hard to describe and extremely haunting. But thinking of the amount of protein, which even exceeds beef, he still forces himself to swallow it. Once that is done, he continues on his way. After walking farther, he reaches a river in the valley below, finds a place to descend, and steps into the water. At this point, north happens to be in the same direction as the river's flow, so he follows the water. But before long, he runs into trouble. Looking around, he finds a tree trunk that can serve as a bridge, and immediately walks over to it. He does not know whether the trunk is strong enough, so for safety he sits on it and inches forward, little by little. His movements are smooth and continuous, and he successfully reaches the opposite bank. He climbs into the forest above to take another route, then returns to the river and continues downstream. He is now at a wide section of river and luckily finds shallow, calm water beside it. Even though he has just taken in protein and is not hungry yet, in survival every opportunity to get more protein has to be used. He finds a large patch of moss, dips it into the water, then catches fresh river shrimp and places them inside the damp moss so they will still be fresh and delicious when he wants to eat them. He puts them into his backpack, rests for a while, then continues wading along the river. After that, he leaves the water and stops in grass as high as a person's head. Looking out from here, a huge mountain range appears ahead. That is exactly the direction he wants to go. He then continues toward the foot of a small hill. Bear Grylls climbs the slope. Although it is fairly steep, it is not high, so he quickly reaches the top. Here he takes the opportunity to replenish his water. Ahead is a slope that is both steep and full of loose rocks. Every step sends clouds of dust into the air, while small stones keep rolling down. Going straight down would be no different from putting himself in danger. So he follows the edge, looks for a safe place, and slowly descends. When he reaches the edge of the water, the river here has a color so strange it is hard to believe. Bear Grylls scoops up a cup and tries a sip.
then immediately spits it out because his lips and tongue burn painfully. It turns out this water is affected by volcanic activity and contains almost every kind of mineral in the periodic table. Yet he still dared to taste it. Continuing onward, he crosses an open area, passes through grassland, and enters the forest again.
Ahead is a scene that makes the scalp go numb. Smoke is rising everywhere. These are traces created by lava flowing underground. Crossing this area is extremely dangerous because the ground is as hot as boiling water. If he falls in, it is over. White material is also flowing out inside, which is actually calcium accumulated over a long period. Despite the danger, Bear Grylls suddenly gets an idea. He takes out the river shrimp that have been kept fresh and treats the hot water here like a natural hot pot. He puts the shrimp into a sock, threads it onto a branch, and dips it into the hot water to boil. After a while, when he takes them out, the shrimp are bright red. He eats them, shell and all. They are crispy, with a strong seafood aroma, and their protein content is many times higher than beef. After eating, he continues forward, leaves the dangerous area, and enters the dense forest. After walking for a while and heading down a slope, a river appears ahead. The opposite bank is flat and spacious, making it an ideal place to camp. Although the drop into the water from this position is fairly high, he sees a small whirlpool beneath the surface and guesses the water there is deep enough. Bear Grylls immediately jumps straight down and swims to the opposite bank. The distance is not far, and before long he reaches land. Although he is soaked from head to toe, he takes off his clothes, wrings them dry, puts them back on, then walks into the flat grassland to inspect the area. Suddenly, he discovers a decomposed rabbit carcass on a log. The strong, rotten smell immediately makes him leave and search for another place more suitable for camp. Not long afterward, he sees a tree trunk bent down toward the ground with excellent flexibility and immediately gets the idea to build a shelter. He finds a V-shaped branch to hold the bent trunk in place, then collects smaller wooden poles and long strips of leaves. He sticks the poles into the ground at even intervals and uses the long leaves like rope to tie everything tightly. The shelter frame quickly takes shape, after which he covers it with dry branches as a roof. Before long, the shelter is complete. Finally, he gathers moss to use as bedding, and along the way also collects dry moss and lichen as tinder, bringing them back and laying them on the ground. He lies down to test it and is extremely satisfied. Starting a fire is nothing to worry about because he has a backup lighter, but first he has to solve the food problem. At the riverbank, he watches the surface and says that New Zealand rivers contain many eels, but catching them requires a special method. He takes long leaves and uses his knife to scrape them until they become loose fibers. This is the key to catching eels. Their teeth grow densely all over the mouth, and once they bite into the fibers, they will become tightly stuck and unable to escape. The bait is the rotten rabbit carcass from earlier. Once everything is ready, he lowers the fibers together with the bait into the water and waits patiently. After a while, an eel smells it and swims over. At first, it stays at a distance, cautiously, circles around for a while, then finally cannot resist and bites. Its teeth immediately become caught in the fibers. Bear Grylls quickly jerks hard and flips the eel straight onto the bank. He rushes over and holds it firmly with both hands. The eel is unexpectedly large and remains incredibly strong, even on land. Bear Grylls picks up a rock and hits it hard, then draws his knife and finishes it off. With that, the protein source for dinner is secured. He carries the eel back to camp and conveniently picks up more dry firewood on the way to prepare dinner. This time, he does not use the lighter. Instead, he takes a broken mobile phone, removes the battery, uses his knife to pry open one end, and smoke immediately rises. He places it into a rocky hollow and strikes it to create fire, then puts the tinder inside. Before long, the flame bursts into a campfire. Next, he begins processing the eel. cuts out large fillets, wraps a thick piece of meat around a branch, and puts it over the hot coals to cook. After waiting a while, he gets to enjoy soft, juicy, fragrant eel meat. Once full, he adds more firewood to the flames, without worrying about setting the whole forest on fire, marks the direction he needs to go, gets up, and continues his journey. He quickly crosses the dense forest, follows a small stream through the trees, and discovers several strange rocks. The amazing thing is that they are so light they seem almost weightless, and when thrown into the water they even float on the surface. The sight is enough to amaze anyone. Continuing forward, an enormous lake appears ahead. On the opposite side of the lake, he can see a road, a clear sign of civilization. But his current position is more than 10 meters high, and jumping down would be no different from suicide. He returns to the forest, finds a very long vine, brings it back, loops it around a tree trunk, secures it with long leaves, then grips the vine and begins descending. Seen from a distance, the height is dizzying. Bear Grylls grips the vine tightly and slowly lowers himself. Halfway down, a waterfall even pours directly onto him, making it extremely dangerous. Eventually, he manages to swing over to a tree growing from a rocky ledge on the cliff. But the danger is still not over, because the vine is no longer long enough to continue downward. He has no choice but to climb down along the tree trunk and stand on a lower rock ledge. At this point, there is no way back. The only choice is to jump into the water. Fortunately, the jump is safe. He surfaces and swims straight to the opposite bank. It takes a great deal of energy before he finally gets ashore. He then steps onto the road, where large truck tire tracks are clearly printed on the ground. Signs of people finally appear, and this survival challenge ends successfully. This time, Bear Grylls is really lucky. He catches a gigantic lizard with his bare hands, eats grilled meat that is golden and crispy outside, charred at the edges, and tender and juicy inside, and enjoys crispy, delicious banana cakes for breakfast. He snacks on rich lava sashimi and millipedes, and when thirsty, drinks wild bamboo milk tea. Sumatra is one of the most volcanically active regions on Earth. This time, Bear Grylls comes here to survive, landing by helicopter on the west coast. An area dominated by black peat swamps, covering as much as 31,000 square miles. It is also reptile territory. If someone gets trapped here, a single wrong decision can come at a heavy price. Bear Grylls is going to experience it directly. When the helicopter reaches the designated area, it drops a rope and he quickly descends from high above into the swamp. Then the helicopter leaves. The surroundings immediately become completely silent. No one can know what dangerous things may be hiding beneath the water, making the atmosphere extremely tense. Looking around, all he sees is devastation and traces of death. He immediately moves quickly towards shallower water. The urgent task now is to find dry land, because staying immersed in water for too long is extremely dangerous. There is higher ground to the east, so he keeps wading toward it. He enters an area full of rotten, decaying wood that breaks apart at the slightest touch, then steps into an extremely dense area of aquatic vegetation. The leaves are sharp as knives, making movement extremely difficult. Beneath his feet is black mud giving off a foul smell, but there is no way back. He can only keep moving forward, rest briefly, then continue pushing through. The water here is very deep, and the plants rise higher than his head. Squeezing through this vegetation is truly exhausting. Before long, he is panting heavily, so he changes his approach, pushing and forcing his way through at the same time. Every step uses a huge amount of energy. Along the way, he conveniently finds a small bit of protein, seizes every chance to replenish protein, and immediately puts it into his mouth, making up at least some of the loss. After that, he continues struggling forward through the dense vegetation. A while later, Bear Grylls finally gets out. Giant palm trees surround him, but the mud under the water here is even softer, making movement extremely slow. Even though he is moving slowly, he keeps going. Whenever he encounters a small patch of land, he tries to get onto it. Suddenly, he notices something nearby, immediately stops and pulls a gigantic lizard out from the bushes. At this point, the animal struggles with astonishing strength, almost too much for him to hold. He has no choice but to use all his strength and slam it hard against a nearby log, stunning it. Then Bear Grylls hardens his heart and ends the poor animal's hunting career. But Bear Grylls is still standing in the water, so the first thing is to leave this place. He continues forward while dragging the enormous block of protein with him. After crossing a stretch of deep water, dry land finally appears ahead. He hurriedly gets onto the bank and quickly passes through tangled branches. After walking for a while, he discovers a river. He throws down the block of protein first, grabs onto a leaning tree trunk, flips himself down, steps into the river, places the giant lizard to one side, and starts thinking about how to cook it. He takes dry bamboo, splits it into tinder, gathers some more dry firewood, stuffs the tinder inside, and with one strike, the fire catches extremely easily. Once the fire is going, the pile of protein in his hands is also put into the charcoal. First, he cuts off the tail and places it directly into the hot coals. Then he opens the belly and removes all the internal organs. The remaining meat also goes into the fire to roast. After waiting a while, the grilled meat turns golden, charred around the edges and tender and juicy inside. He cuts it into pieces and puts them into his mouth. It is unbelievably delicious. No one knows how many times more protein it contains than beef. After eating and drinking his fill, Bear Grylls returns to the riverbank to replenish water, fills his bottle, and also cools his body. After that, he continues following the river because rivers are highways leading to civilization. When he reaches a section with no route left, he grips logs lying across the river and moves over little by little. After reaching the opposite bank, he encounters another towering waterfall. In a situation like this, taking a detour simply does not exist for Bear Grylls. He climbs the slope beside it, finds a thick, strong vine, cuts off a long section, then returns and ties one end to himself. He loops the other end around nearby rocks and tree trunks to secure it, tightens the vine, and begins descending. The water around him is rushing violently, and from time to time blasts him with force, while the rock surface is extremely slippery. He can only move down little by little, with the greatest possible care. After all the difficulty, he finally gets down. He does not rest for long, but continues downstream and enters an area of dense vegetation. Heavy rain is now falling in the forest, soaking him almost from head to toe, but he does not even bother avoiding the rain and keeps pushing through the jungle. Passing a bamboo thicket, he walks over and taps the stems. After a while, he chooses the right section, cuts a small opening, and pure water immediately flows out. Bear Grylls leans in and drinks, closing his eyes and enjoying the refreshing moment until he is satisfied, then turns and continues. After walking farther, he discovers an enormous ancient tree, a giant banyan with countless large roots hanging down from high above. Both amazed and delighted, Bear Grylls grabs the roots and climbs straight upward, moving with the agility of a monkey. Before long, he climbs to a high place, looks around, then quickly climbs back down. There is a natural platform up there that would be perfect as a shelter, except it still needs a little work. There are several banana plants nearby. Bear Grylls pulls out his small knife, cuts down entire plants, and gathers the large broad leaves. While doing so, he also discovers a bunch of bananas, and conveniently cuts that down too, taking the entire large bunch and eating it right there. They are sweet and refreshing and taste quite good. He keeps eating one banana after another. They are sweet and refreshing and taste quite good. He keeps eating one banana after another until he is full and satisfied. After eating, he uses vines to tie together the pile of banana leaves he gathered, climbs back up to the high platform, then pulls everything up after him. He spreads some of the leaves over the place where he will sleep, then lights another campfire. By the time everything is finished,
It is already dark.
The next morning, he wakes after a good night's sleep. Bear Grylls' breakfast is a juicy lava. He puts it directly into his mouth, and the moment he bites down, he feels a rich, fatty burst explode inside his mouth, although his facial expression is a little difficult to keep under control. After eating it, he catches another millipede and brings it up to his nose to smell.
It smells a little like almonds, but Bear Grylls remains very cautious and does not dare eat it recklessly, so he decides to let it go. After that, he grips the tree roots and slides down from the tree, beginning a new day's journey through the forest. While moving quickly, a red snake suddenly appears ahead. It is an extremely dangerous mangrove tree snake. Without professional skills, it is best not to touch it.
Even so, Bear Grylls boldly pulls it down onto the ground, uses a branch to pin the head firmly, then grabs the head with his hand. Once he has it securely, he unleashes his inherited special move: squeeze the head, remove the tail, throw away the head, and turn the remaining body into spicy strips. The meat is chewy, crispy, and springy. He keeps eating until he is satisfied, then continues through the forest. No one knows how long he has been walking when a brilliantly blue lake suddenly appears ahead, and Bear Grylls immediately jumps straight in. The water is astonishingly clear, and countless fish can be seen swimming below. After coming ashore, he starts getting ideas about those fish. Once he decides, he immediately acts. He gathers vines, sits down, takes off his shoes, and then even takes off his trousers, threads the vines through the trouser legs, and turns them into a bag-shaped net. Then he takes this trouser net up a tree, lowers it into the water, uses white termites as bait, and slowly drops it down to wait for fish to enter the trap. After waiting a long time, he pulls it up to check and finds absolutely nothing inside. He does not plan to keep sitting there waiting, so he removes the vines, puts his trousers back on, gets up, and continues. The scene changes and the sun has appeared. Bear Grylls crosses through a rocky cave area, takes advantage of the visible sun to confirm that his direction is correct, then continues forward. While climbing along a slope, he suddenly slips and nearly loses his life on the spot. Fortunately, he grabs a small tree in time and manages to steady himself. Ahead is a tall, sheer cliff with countless vines hanging down below. Bear Grylls makes use of them to descend. He tries to control his speed, but the effort consumes an enormous amount of strength, and before long he is panting heavily. Fortunately, halfway down there is a rock ledge sticking out, so he stands there temporarily to catch his breath. But the vine he is holding has also reached its end. He has no choice but to turn and grab another vine, then continues sliding downward while trying to control his speed. Before long, he is almost at the bottom. Finally, he launches himself into a jump and lands heavily on the ground. By this point, both of Bear Grylls' arms are so stiff they are almost numb. While resting, he notices the shadow of a person in the distance, so he hurriedly heads down into the riverbed and climbs onto the bank. Signs of civilization have appeared. This challenge can be considered a success. Bear Grylls discovers a patch of aquatic plants in a pond. It may sound unbelievable, but in this freezing environment, getting to eat this makes him even happier than finding dozens of kilograms of beef. One bite is incredibly crisp and satisfying. Add a few sweet wild berries. After eating, he cleanses his palate with cool, slippery earthworm sashimi and protein-rich larvae. The Patagonian ice fields stretch across the southern Andes and are one of the largest wilderness regions in the world, as well as the third largest continental ice area, almost one of the places farthest from civilization on the planet. This time, Bear Grylls comes here to conquer the challenge. He rides in a helicopter over countless snow-covered mountain ranges. After a while, they reach the designated area. He opens the door and jumps straight out. The moment he lands on the snowfield, bone-piercing cold hits him immediately, so intense that even his gloved hands become stiff. Bear Grylls quickly removes the parachute, gets up,
and begins walking to warm his body.
A magnificent and breathtaking landscape appears ahead, but behind that beauty lie countless dangers, which goes without saying. He has not gone far when an avalanche suddenly occurs in the distance. An enormous mass of snow crashes down from the mountainside. The sound shakes the entire space, and its terrifying power sends chills down anyone's spine. Fortunately, he is not traveling in that direction, but this also makes Bear Grylls much more alert. After walking farther, he discovers glacier crevasses. Do not underestimate them, because some are extremely difficult to see. One wrong step and you can fall straight down, which is extremely dangerous. Bear Grylls understands this clearly, so he immediately takes out a rope, ties himself and the cameraman together, and walks in front to probe the route. Sure enough, after walking for a while, he suddenly slips, with half his body falling into a crevasse and terrifying the cameraman. Fortunately, he still manages to struggle back up. The farther they go, the wider these crevasses become, and they are so deep the bottom cannot be seen. To simulate the situation of someone falling in, Bear Grylls ties himself to the rope and deliberately lowers himself into the deep glacier crevasse. Where the rope hangs down, the bottom cannot be seen. Now the task is to find a way to climb out. At first glance, the two ice walls are fairly narrow, but trying to use the technique of bracing hands and feet against both walls does not work because the ice is too slippery and offers no grip at all. After struggling for a while without success, he thinks of another method. He takes a short piece of rope, ties it into a prusik knot, wraps it several times around the main hanging rope, and leaves a loop below for his foot. This gives his foot something to step on, allowing him to push up and climb with all his strength. The scene changes, and Bear Grylls continues across the snow. A blizzard is now raging violently. This kind of weather causes body temperature to fall extremely quickly. If he keeps moving like this, sooner or later he will become an ice statue. The urgent task now is to find shelter. But in a world of nothing except ice and snow, if he wants shelter, the only option is to create it himself. Bear Grylls finds a slope covered in deep snow and begins digging inward. The snow on the slope is very thick. He keeps digging continuously until he carves out a fairly large space inside, spreads the parachute on the ground as a floor, and crawls in to rest. He stays like that until night falls. The next morning, as soon as he wakes up, he does a few exercises to warm himself and then sits down on the snow. Since the challenge began, he still has not replenished water. But scooping up snow and eating it directly is not good because it is too cold. So he puts snow into a water bottle, tucks it inside his clothing, waits for it to melt, then drinks it before getting up and continuing across the snow. Surviving in a place like this is an extremely difficult process, but if he does not keep moving forward, it means he will remain here forever. In such a vast, snow-covered region, the greatest danger is still avalanches. Yet Bear Grylls continues tormenting himself. He climbs onto the top of the deep snow, ties a rope to his backpack, then buries it deeply in the snow as an anchor point. He pulls on it and finds it quite secure. Then he uses the rope to descend a short distance, places the camera there, climbs back up, and begins simulating an avalanche. When a camera is buried in snow in a place like this, finding it again is extremely difficult. Bear Grylls has to spend quite a long time digging before he retrieves it. If it were a major avalanche, a person buried beneath the snow would be almost impossible to find. That is what is truly frightening. Once finished, he continues down the slope. The scene changes. Today's weather is much better. The blizzard gradually disappears. While Bear Grylls is moving among the rolling mountains, he thinks of a better way to descend. He takes out his sled, runs forward to build up speed, then shoots away, excitedly shouting, "I love Patagonia!" In only a moment, he leaves the snow-covered area and enters dense vegetation filled with tangled branches. There are also countless sharp thorns inside. Fortunately, the clothes he is wearing are thick enough to withstand them. Bear Grylls does not think twice and steps straight in.
But only after putting his foot down does he discover that beneath him is nothing but rotten vegetation and freezing water.
He lifts up a mass of rotten roots. A strong, foul smell rises from beneath his feet, and the bone-piercing cold immediately hits him. He only wants to leave this place as quickly as possible, so he speeds up. Before long, the soles of his feet are numb and have lost sensation. Yet this area still has not ended. Water is everywhere. After walking for a while, light rain begins falling, making him almost unable to bear it any longer. As soon as he sees dry land, Bear Grylls immediately crawls and scrambles onto the bank, then enters the forest. By now, he is so cold that he is shivering violently. The first thing he does is gather dry firewood, then find old moss as tinder. Once everything is ready, he starts a fire. With one spark, it catches immediately, with extreme ease. After warming himself beside the fire for a while, he gets up and goes out to find some protein to warm his body. He reaches a pond and sees a large amount of aquatic vegetation. He immediately walks over, grabs a handful, and puts it into his mouth. It is incredibly crisp and satisfying to bite, and it also provides carbohydrates. Its nutritional value is dozens of times greater than beef. In the forest, he sees a rotten log, breaks it open and searches for a while, finding several small beetle larvae and even digging up earthworms, all sources of high-quality protein. He puts the larvae into his mouth first, but they are so small he can barely taste anything. Next comes the earthworm. He brushes off the soil stuck to the outside and puts it into his mouth. It feels smooth and slippery, chewy and springy, but also slimy. The day barely passes like that. The next morning, Bear Grylls continues through the forest, crosses countless fallen, rotten tree trunks, and finds a river in the woods. Just as the saying goes that rivers are highways leading to civilization, he begins following the water. After walking for a while, he notices berries nearby and picks them to eat immediately. They are intensely sweet, giving him a little more strength. Then he gets up and continues along the riverbank. Rocks are scattered across the route ahead. Bear Grylls carefully steps over them, but this is not a major problem. After walking farther, an incredibly high waterfall appears ahead, estimated at about 150 feet. Just looking at it is terrifying, but asking Bear Grylls to take a detour simply does not exist. Taking the long way around could mean being hungry for several more days. He looks around, finds a fairly good position on the cliff, quickly climbs up and lowers the rope. At first, there are still places to put his feet, so he descends slowly. Once the ledges run out, he begins lowering himself faster. He shouts as he goes down. Fortunately, everything goes smoothly. Once at the bottom, he recovers the rope and continues downstream. Along the way, Bear Grylls notices something growing on a tree, immediately climbs up at an astonishing speed, picks it, then comes back down to the ground as quickly as a squirrel. It turns out not to be fruit growing on the tree, but a kind of fungus, and it is also a staple food of indigenous people in Patagonia. He breaks off a piece and tastes it. It looks like bread, but has almost no flavor, although it still provides a little energy. Bear Grylls then continues, and several hours later reaches a lake. Light rain is falling, while the direction he needs to go lies on the opposite side. The ground is covered with driftwood. This gives him an idea. He gathers all the wood and builds it into a raft, places 2 logs crosswise on top to reinforce it, then uses his parachute as a sail. When everything is ready, he even prepares an escape plan by lighting a fire on the shore in advance, then pushes the raft into the water, sits down, and sets off. At first, everything is fine, but after traveling for a while, the raft begins slowly sinking. Bear Grylls paddles with all his strength, but the raft barely moves. Realizing the situation is not good, he immediately stuffs his dry clothes into a waterproof backpack and decides to jump straight into the lake. The moment he enters the water, the freezing cold instantly sweeps over his entire body. Bear Grylls still uses all his strength to swim back toward the shore. Only with great difficulty does he climb onto land. Fortunately, he left himself an escape route. He immediately puts on the dry clothes, takes off his shoes, and dries them beside the fire. At this point, the survival challenge can be considered over. Other people surviving in a world of ice and snow go 3 days and miss 9 meals, while Bear Grylls in the wilderness are like opening a banquet. He eats premium grilled meat that is dozens of times more nutritious than beef, catches squirrels frozen solid in the wild, which can be charcoal grilled or eaten as sashimi. This time, Bear Grylls comes to Siberia, where the temperature never rises above -20 degrees Celsius. In winter, there are only about 4 hours of daylight each day. Bear Grylls still chooses to enter by parachuting from high above. When the helicopter reaches the designated altitude, he launches himself into the frozen landscape, free falls for a while, then opens the parachute. The movement is smooth and continuous, and he quickly lands on the ground. The moment he sets foot down, he immediately feels the terrifying cold. Bear Grylls quickly removes the parachute, stuffs it into his backpack, gets up, and begins the journey. How frightening is the cold in western Siberia? To demonstrate it directly, Bear Grylls places a small knife against his hand, and the blade immediately sticks tightly to his skin. If he pulls it off forcefully, it might tear the skin away with it, so he has to use a gentler method. He makes some warm iced tea and pours it over his arm. Thanks to that, the knife blade comes off easily. Then he turns and continues forward, entering an open wilderness covered completely in white. This kind of terrain is extremely dangerous because there is nothing except endless white snow. The urgent task is to get down the mountain quickly. With that in mind, Bear Grylls begins looking for a way down. After walking for a while, he reaches the edge of a cliff. Looking into the distance, he sees only mist and clouds swirling around like some hidden, immortal realm. Beautiful as it is, for Bear Grylls right now, this is not good news. Looking around, he finds a section that is relatively easy to descend and immediately follows it downward. But the slope is extremely steep, and he almost has to roll and crawl at the same time, making it very dangerous. In return, it saves quite a lot of time. Before long, he has rolled to the edge of the forest. Feeling that there may be something to eat here, he finds a rotten tree trunk and checks beneath the bark. He peels off piece after piece but finds nothing, then digs deeper inside and catches a tiny larva. Small as it is still meat. He immediately puts it into his mouth and swallows it in one gulp, enough to line his stomach and lift his spirits. After that, Bear Grylls continues down the slope. No one knows how long he has been walking when he discovers a rock cave, which can conveniently be used as a shelter. Just as he is about to go out to look for firewood, he has not gone far when he discovers a dead animal lying by the path. This really is protein falling from the sky. Although he does not know how many days it has been dead, in this enormous natural refrigerator, the problem is not too serious. Looking at the thick deer hide, Bear Grylls cannot help wanting to skin it because it would make an excellent piece of warm clothing. But in this environment, another problem becomes obvious. It is simply too cold. He has only been working for a while when several hours have already passed, and even his gloves are frozen stiff. This cannot continue. So he hurriedly lights a fire first to warm his numb hands. Once they feel a little better, he continues patiently skinning it bit by bit. After finishing one side, he turns the carcass over, grabs the large deer leg, first uses the knife to strike and gradually break it until the entire leg separates, then continues removing the hide. This takes a great deal of time and also consumes a lot of calories. He cuts off a premium piece of meat, skewers it, and roasts it over the hot coals. After waiting for the venison to cook just right, he immediately eats it. Crispy outside and tender inside, it is unbelievably delicious, no different from food in a 5-star restaurant. He eats until he is so moved he almost cries, and with energy restored, he continues working. After all the effort, he finally finishes removing the hide. There is still a great deal of meat left, and it cannot be wasted. He goes outside, gathers flexible branches, bends them into loops,
lays branches across the deer hide, fixes the wooden loops in place, then uses parachute cord to tie everything tightly. Just like that, he has a sled. The deer leg he cut off is placed on it as well and temporarily set aside.
The day passes like that.
The next morning he wakes up, first tends the fire, then pulls the sled and sets off, climbing along the snow-covered slope. Only after a hard struggle does he reach the mountaintop. Standing there, Bear Grylls feels the scenery is incredibly magnificent, as though he were on top of the world. But if he wants to descend to lower ground, walking would be far too slow. He thinks of a way and directly brings out the sled and sits on it himself. Bear Grylls' body really is tough. Even after rolling over and falling several times, he still smiles, gets up, and continues toward an area with vegetation. There are not only trees here, but also an enormous frozen lake. It seems to stretch endlessly. He stops and observes for a while, then slowly steps onto the frozen lake, using the deer leg as a walking stick.
As he walks, he tests the strength of the ice. Once it feels very stable, he starts moving faster. After going some distance, he stops again, apparently having thought of something. In the freezing weather, Bear Grylls takes off his clothes and ties a rope around himself. Beside him, he has already prepared an area of open water that is not frozen over. He takes a deep breath and jumps straight in. In the bone-piercing cold, Bear Grylls is clearly extremely tense. His heart races and his core body temperature drops rapidly. But at a moment like this, he must not panic. He forces himself to calm down and then does something even crazier. He dives into the water and swims beneath the ice covering the lake. Once he is under there is almost no way back, and direction is extremely difficult to determine. Only a short time feels endlessly long, but eventually he surfaces through another opening. At this point, he desperately grabs the edge of the ice and struggles for a while before reaching the bank. He takes a deep breath and forces himself up onto land. By now, his body's reactions have already slowed. He removes the rope, puts his clothes back on, and runs as fast as he can. Reaching the place beside the lake, where he prepared a fire in advance, he first wipes himself down, then takes off his socks and sits beside the fire to warm up. The scene changes to a forest. Bear Grylls stops and looks around for a while. Everything in every direction looks more or less the same, and it seems he has become lost. Faced with this situation, he can only try to determine direction. First, he walks to a fairly tall tree. As the saying goes, stand high and see far. He plans to climb up and look around. Takes a piece of rope, ties his 2 feet together to increase friction, making it easier to climb the tree. Once ready, he shoots upward like an arrow. His speed is astonishing, and before long he is already high above the ground. But there are many branches above. To avoid being hindered as he continues climbing, Bear Grylls cuts the rope connecting his feet and climbs straight up until he reaches a height where he can see into the distance. Mountains lie ahead, and that is exactly the direction he needs to go. He then quickly climbs down, gets up, and continues toward the mountains. Along the way, he discovers a dry riverbed. Looking at the large and small rocks scattered everywhere, it is clear that water once flowed through here. If you are lost in the wilderness and do not know where to go, following a riverbed is also not a bad choice. Bear Grylls slides down the slope. Just as he is about to cross, he discovers a pine cone on the ground. Picking it up, he sees that it has been gnawed by a squirrel, and the ground is also full of squirrel tracks. That means a source of protein has arrived. Bear Grylls walks to a tree and leans a wooden branch against the trunk. In his experience, squirrels are naturally quite lazy. If there is an easy way to climb a tree quickly, they absolutely will not climb from the base. He places a noose on the wooden branch and makes several more similar traps around the area to increase the chance of catching one. After waiting for a while, he returns to check and, sure enough, finds a squirrel frozen stiff. He takes out his small knife to process it. The squirrel is so rigid that it is very difficult to butcher, and in the end he can only shave and chop at it to cut the meat into pieces. He skewers the meat and roasts it over the hot coals. After waiting a while, Bear Grylls begins enjoying the grilled meat. He has eaten all kinds of things in the wilderness, but the deliciousness of squirrel meat ranks near the top in his heart. After finishing the grilled meat, he even makes squirrel sashimi, freezing cold, but still an excellent flavor. After eating his fill, he gets up and looks for a nearby shelter. He discovers a large log leaning against the base of a tree and creating a fairly good open space, saving a great deal of time building a sleeping place. He then gathers a large amount of wood and places it against the main log. He digs the peat from beneath the snow into large blocks and spreads them across the bottom as a mattress, then finally covers the top with fresh branches. When that is done, he digs a hole in the ground, then finds a birch tree in the forest and scrapes off bark because it is excellent fire-starting material. Returning to camp, he quickly lights a campfire. On the second day, Bear Grylls sets off early, leaves the forest and enters open ground. Thick fog surrounds him as he keeps moving forward. Suddenly, railway tracks faintly appear ahead. He immediately speeds up and runs toward them. At exactly that moment, a train is passing not far away. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, Bear Grylls sprints toward the tracks and arrives just in time, accelerates for another stretch, then jumps directly onto the last carriage of the train, leaving the cameraman standing there completely stunned. The man eating hot pot in the wilderness is not crazy. He is a survival expert. He gets to eat juicy berries and pieces of fresh, tender, juicy meat. He catches a ptarmigan and charcoal grills it until charred outside and soft and sweet inside. After eating, he even has wild sugarcane for dessert and can soak in a hot spring to relax. Iceland lies within the Arctic Circle, and most of the country is barren wilderness. In some places, Vikings live here. They are descendants of people who migrated here from Norway more than 1,000 years ago. In addition, Iceland's terrain is extremely unique. Known as the land of ice and fire, it has more than 2,000 square miles of glaciers and is also one of the places with the most volcanoes in the world. This time, Bear Grylls comes here to conquer the challenge. He takes a helicopter to the designated area, then jumps from high above, free falls for a while, opens the parachute, and lands on a completely white snowfield. The moment he touches down, he feels the bone-piercing cold. After removing the parachute, he immediately starts exercising to warm his body. But even after walking for a while, he still cannot determine east, west, north, and south. He raises his arm like the hand of a clock and points it toward the sun. The direction halfway between his arm and the 12 o'clock position is south. After determining direction, he continues across the snow. After traveling for a while, a blizzard arrives. At this moment, he discovers an enormous ice cave and immediately becomes interested. First, he follows the slope downward, then slides below and successfully enters the cave. There are strange patterns here that make him marvel at the miraculous work of nature. He walks while admiring them, then encounters another slope and continues sliding downward. When he exits the cave and returns outside, the blizzard hits again. After walking farther, the strong wind is still howling endlessly. This cannot continue because his core body heat is gradually being lost. Ahead, Bear Grylls discovers a snowy slope, immediately runs toward it, and begins digging deep into the snow. It takes a great deal of effort before he finally digs a hole large enough for a person to shelter inside. Crawling in feels much more comfortable. After resting for a while, he continues working, rolling a snowball to block the entire cave entrance, then lies inside to rest. In his spare time, he also scoops some snow into a cup and lets it gradually melt into drinking water. The day passes like that. The next morning, he wakes up and there is still a little snowstorm outside, but now the sun can be seen. He determines direction again and continues, entering an enormous glacier area that is extremely slippery. After walking for a while, a crevasse appears ahead. This kind of terrain is extremely dangerous and absolutely cannot be crossed, so he turns and goes around to one side to avoid it. After leaving the ice cave area, he steps onto black volcanic ground. At this point, he can be considered far away from the danger of the glacier. He continues forward, crosses a jagged rocky field, and enters a plain. Before long, a river appears ahead. This is glacial meltwater, so it is bone-chillingly cold. He wants to reach the opposite bank, but the river is too wide to jump across. After thinking for a while, the only option is to risk crossing. He moves downstream a short distance from above, stands on a rock outcrop, and once ready, jumps down, then quickly climbs onto a rock on the opposite side. It is so cold, he does not dare rest for even 1 second, and immediately climbs higher. With no fire for warmth, the only thing he can do is run to heat his body. No one knows how long he has been running when he enters an area filled with mist. Here he discovers large and small pools of boiling hot mud everywhere. The hot mud pools even combine into a small stream. He follows the water downhill. When the water becomes less hot, he gets an idea, gathers many rocks and blocks off a section, takes off his clothes, and begins enjoying a hot spring in the wilderness. Soaking in it is both warm and comfortable. Enjoying a natural bath alone in the middle of the wilderness immediately lifts his spirits. When he is finished, he puts his clothes back on and continues, entering an area filled with scalding, boiling mud. Hot mud is everywhere and extremely dangerous. He does not dare step carelessly and has to test every step firmly before putting his foot down. After leaving that area, he discovers some reindeer lichen and picks a little to eat temporarily. Although it is not very nutritious, it still fills his stomach. After eating, he continues. Before long, he discovers a dead deer in a pit. Thanks to this natural refrigerator, the deer carcass is still fairly fresh. He draws his knife, cuts off a piece of meat, and also gouges out the deer's eye. Carrying the eyeball and the premium piece of meat, he returns to the hot water. He uses thick cord as a skewer, threads the meat and eyeball onto it, then dips them into the hot water to cook. After waiting a while, he puts the eyeball into his mouth. With one bite, the liquid inside sprays out. The flavor is actually quite good, and the texture feels like soft cartilage. After finishing that, it is the meat's turn. Once cooked, it smells wonderful. He takes a bite, and it is incredibly delicious, with no one knowing how many times more protein it contains than beef. Before long, he eats everything clean, gets up, and continues across the grassland. Suddenly, violent winds rise with an astonishing speed. Even worse, the route ahead is blocked. Faced with this situation, he has no choice but to take off his clothes, wrap them up to keep them dry, and wade into the water. The rushing current makes movement extremely difficult, and only after staggering for a long time does he finally reach the opposite bank. He hurriedly puts on the dry clothes and does a few exercises to warm himself. The scene changes, and no one knows how long he has been walking when he reaches an area full of vegetation and quickly discovers bird feathers on the ground. They are ptarmigan feathers. It looks like there is something delicious around here. So he has to prepare a little entertainment equipment for this source of protein. He quickly sets a trap nearby. Once that is done, he finds a flat place close by and covers it completely. Then he goes to gather rocks, stacks them one by one into a circle, and covers the top with branches. Just like that, he has a warm shelter. When it is finished, he gets up and goes outside to look for firewood and fire-starting material. When he returns to the shelter and starts the fire, one spark makes it catch immediately with extreme ease. After busying himself for a while, more than an hour has passed. When it is time to check the trap, he reaches the spot, and at first glance, sees a ptarmigan caught in the snare. He carries it to one side and processes it right there. This bird has quite a lot of meat. He takes it back, skewers it, and charcoal grills it beside the fire. After waiting a while, he enjoys the meat, charred outside and soft and sweet inside, so delicious that it leaves him extremely satisfied. On the third day, he continues. Along the way, he discovers a plant that looks withered but is actually still alive. He pulls it out. The root looks like wild sugarcane. Eating it makes the mouth feel slightly numb, but it has the effect of increasing resistance. After eating, he continues forward. After a while, he enters a jagged rocky area covered in moss. The uneven ground is extremely difficult to walk on, and deep holes are hidden everywhere, so he has to carefully weave through. Here, he discovers an enormous cave that is pitch black inside. Because he loves exploring caves, he immediately becomes interested. He picks up some firewood, bundles it into a torch, lights it, and enters. The space is not large, but the rock walls are damp. There is only one route, so he simply follows it deeper inside. He quickly climbs up and gets out. By the time he emerges, the moss-covered land is already behind him. But the hardship is still not over. Suddenly, violent winds hit with an estimated speed of 50 to 60 miles per hour. After walking against the wind for a while, he can barely endure it. Fortunately, there is a depression nearby. He hurriedly crawls inside and lies flat to avoid the wind, staying there until the strong wind gradually weakens, then gets up and continues across the black sand plain. Suddenly, he sees a utility pole in the distance. Signs of civilization have appeared, and this challenge also ends successfully.
Yeah,